I don't really pay much attention to the YouTube channel anyway. I'm not invested in like building the YouTube channel to any significant degree, at least not right now. And if I do, I'll probably just create another channel for it. But right now, just like at least I have like a backlog of some of the videos and shit. Um, that's what we're doing. So we're gonna be reviewing Jay Dyer and Tim Pool here, but I'm also gonna let you guys know I'm not sure how many more of these analysis we'll do. You know, if I find something interesting I want to do, I'll probably do it from here and there. Like I'll finish up the prisoners versus the guards for sure. That's when I just want to finish that video in general. Like I said, I kind of just force myself to watch certain stuff that I would watch anyway on stream and break it down in order to, figure out what I want to do on stream. But I'm kind of just tired of like dedicating time to this or dedicating so much time to this. To give you guys a bit of perspective on why I'm feeling this way. I'll show you a little I guess you could say behind the scenes. Um so let's see here. If I can pull it up properly. Cuz had shit changed around when we did the show the other day. See if we can. Um Here we go. Right? Okay. So just so you guys can see, this is what some of what we're dealing with here, right? Let me see if I can do this real quick. This is these are like our achievements, our achievement goals for Kick, right? I don't know if I'm like if I get in trouble for showing this or what. Like I don't think it's my shit, right? But yeah, like you got to reach a total of 10 subscribers in the last 30 days. Like, gifted subs are not included. So like motherfuckers got to subscribe to the channel, average of 50 viewers in the last 30 days. That's probably achievable depending on what I do, right? The streaming part is not hard, right? Hanging with my community. We do that all the time. But then they want unique chatters and shit. Like, we're almost there, right? We got like 42 or whatever. But the thing is, a lot of those unique chatters are fucking a lot of those unique chatters are like fucking people who just hop in the chat and like spam. So we get like new chatters all the time. But it's sometimes a lot of the time they're just randoms, just like throwing random shit in the chat. And then so that means when people who are already frequent viewers of the channel just come in and type something, whatever, we don't get anything for that. But to be honest with you, I'm not really chasing any of these, to be completely honest with you, right? Like I'm not chasing any of those achievements. The reason I show you that is because I don't care to. And if I'm not mistaken, last year, most of these goals I'd already met. Pretty much all of them. So like trying to do it again, I'm not really too keen on. Like I don't like wasting my time. If anybody knows me, if anybody remembers any of the things I say, right? One of my biggest pet peeves is repetition, right? So, I mean, this kind of falls into that category. I'm not going to do some shit I just did last year, just achieved not too long ago, like all over again. It's like, it's one thing if I just do it by default without even trying, but I'm not going to put a bunch of energy into doing that. So, yeah, we'll still do the ism. Not too sure about those dates anymore. We'll figure it out. Probably because my birthday is coming up. I just have some other priorities. Don't really want to focus on streaming. Not that I was focusing on it to begin with. I just don't want to put much focus on it at all. We might probably start doing some more gaming streams, some more fun stuff. I'm gonna start up my meme war shit. just having fun looking at funny shit. But I don't know if you guys know, I'm actually a very serious person. I don't like the jokey too much. Um, I don't like niggas that play too much. It's not even that I take shit like personally or anything. It's just that like, um, if you're joking around too much, if everything is a joke, then nothing is really serious. You don't know what to take serious. So I just don't like to do that a lot. And I'm not a big fan of people who do it too much, or people who think I do, who I think do it too much. Right. So I'm just gonna my channel's gonna be a lot more random. I'm gonna be doing the shit that I want to do, but I'm still gonna be doing the serious stuff because, like I said, I'm a serious person. Um, but yeah, you might not see me joking as much. You might not see me laughing and hee hee ha ha as much, and that's because I'm just getting older, right? I don't know. I think it's just I want y'all to see more of who I really am and shit. I try to be entertaining on the channel and everything, but truthfully, I'm not sure if I really am a very entertaining person if I'm not trying to be, trying to keep people engaged. But I don't feel like spending the energy to do all that. So maybe I shouldn't be a streamer, right? But I'm not really trying to be a streamer. I'm streaming because this is the easiest way for me to do some of the stuff I want to do. Because I'm kind of a perfectionist. So if I decide to like, put out videos and shit, like you might not ever get them because it takes me forever to do it. And I'm being like extremely particular about every little thing. It's easy to just go live with a stream. Can't control everything, but at least it's out there. At least it's done. You know what I'm saying? So I know I didn't talk a lot, talked your ear off, but like I said, on YouTube, this will have a different title. We're just covering this back and forth between Jay and Tim, but for the rest of y'all, this is titled "Where Do We Go From Here?" because I'm not entirely sure where we are going from here. And I wanted to let y'all know that because, some of y'all have subscribed to the channel. I appreciate it. There are a lot of other issues you'd be having, like, technical issues and shit behind the scenes that could be solved if I were to pay for certain software and shit. But like I said, I'm not so invested in this and I'm not making enough bread off of this to justify those investments. So I'm not entirely sure where we're going to go from here, until I have a little bit more time and I feel like doing this shit and I feel like it's making more of an impact. I'm probably going to chill on some of this content. We're going to chill on some of the analysis or whatever after we finish the prisoners versus guards. And we're going to be doing more fun content. I'm probably going to be streaming more on like, Twitch and shit too. So you can follow me if you want to, whatever. You guys if you guys follow me on Kick, go follow me on the YouTube. We'll be probably doing some different content. Likely dropping an interview we did there on its own. And we'll probably try to clip up some stuff too. That's another reason we won't be probably doing the streaming shit as much because I don't feel like doing both. And if I'm doing the streaming shit, I'm probably just gonna pay somebody to do like the clipping shit or whatever and do all the other shit for the YouTube for me because I just don't feel like putting time into it. Like I don't care enough about this shit, to be honest with you. But some stuff just interests me, like this Jay Dyer and Tim Pool back and forth. So we're gonna cover this right now. And it looks like Jay Dyer has like clipped out the back and forth for his channel. So we're just going to go with his video because I don't feel like scrubbing through Tim's video trying to find the section where they went back and forth. It seems like Jay has isolated the back and forth for his channel, which he should do. Shout out to Jay. This is how a primo grifter should move. But it also makes it easier for us. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm probably gonna speed this
you're
up
not
too.
familiar with what grounding is. That just means
But
giving
we're
an
gonna
epistemic justification.
individually fact check certain claims. We're gonna see who's right about whatever claim, because we can, or at least like, you know, we'll consult the AI and see what the general consensus is, and then we'll get into the argumentation and what fallacies might be at play here. Because a lot of you niggas don't seem to care about metacognition, logic, and yeah, just to address one of the small things that Hotep asked when we called in the other day, is like he said, "Where's the logic here?" Here, right? Truth be told, the logic is everywhere, right? Because at the end of the day, right, a fallacy only means that you have a flaw in your logic. Technically speaking, everything everybody thinks and every opinion they have, everything they use to justify it, uses a line of logic. It's just a question of whether that logic is sound or not. Whether it's a formal fallacy or an informal fallacy, right? Whether you just have a problem with the way that you're structuring your argument, or whether your argument itself has a fundamental issue, right? So we're gonna look at one thing here too, right? A description of one of the other reasons why you can see why understanding fallacies, being aware of them and not falling for them is important, and understanding philosophy is important by consequence. Look at this here. The sunken cost fallacy occurs when individuals continue investing in a project, decision, or activity based on the amount of resources, time, effort already committed, rather than evaluating the current and future value or potential return. This fallacy leads to irrational decision making, as people feel compelled to justify past investments instead of cutting their losses and making choices based on current circumstances and future benefits. You hear that? Me continuing to do shit a certain way on this channel, even though I know all the shit I put into it really didn't amount to shit. If I were to continue doing this and not take account of what's going on in my life right now and where I actually want to go, where I actually want to see myself in the future, the benefits I really want from this, I would be guilty of a fallacy. I would be guilty of fallacious reasoning, and that fallacious reasoning has no relevance in a debate. It has relevance in my life.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
You hear what I'm saying? So I'm not going to succumb to the sunken cost fallacy. I'm going to sit down, we're going to do some thinking, and we're going to figure out what we're doing with this fucking channel.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Because if I don't feel like putting the effort into it, it doesn't matter how much effort I've already put into it. It doesn't matter how much momentum I got. It's not really going to go anywhere in the future. Might as well just cut my losses now.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
So, just so you know, fallacies are important to understand, not just for fucking debates. It's important for your own metacognition, your own thinking, understanding why you think the way you do and why you do the things you do. Right? Or don't think, or don't do certain things. Now that we're done with that, let's continue.
Why that's the case. Good reasons, not just.
And so what's yours?
Well, I believe the Christian worldview, and I would defend that.
And now explain it.
But it's coherent, it's consistent.
Right, how?
Well, if you don't have that worldview, you are immediately caught in a bunch of contradictions.
Like what?
Like picking and choosing.
Like what?
Like picking and choosing, well, I believe this thing, and then I won't believe this thing. That wouldn't be consistent.
What things are contradictory? What are you talking about?
Well, to say that...
See, like he's asking him, right? We haven't gotten into this part later. But he's asking him, like, what things would be in contradiction if you don't hold the Christian worldview, right?
we do it because it works as a contradiction.
Why?
Because it's a fallacy. Works to do what?
Explain your idea.
I explained the fallacy right there.
That's a fallacy.
Explaining it?
I don't have to.
See, like Tim is just being dense.
It is. You've contradicted yourself.
Like, to say something like that is just very, very ridiculous.
Because that was a contradiction. It's paradoxical.
Well,
you said one thing was and one thing wasn't, so you're wrong. I'm not going to elaborate.
I mean, I have been.
That's God. Tim is so dumb. I'm sorry. Like I'm just saying. Like just this. Like this part of the conversation was hilarious to me because now Tim is quite literally just being indignant.
Elaborating. So if you're characterizing my position as not elaborating, I've been very explicit.
I mean, this is, like I said, Jay cut this up.
Conservative is out of the UK. Bernard Lewis, who is the father of Samuel Huntington, who wrote books that influenced the Bush administration. So the Bush, Cheney, those are like sort of the arch neocons, but it's actually out of the UK from Bernard Lewis. And then they are also influenced by Leo Strauss, who was influenced by Hitler. But they also have an influence.
Is that the guy that made jeans?
Strauss. No.
Yeah, Leo Strauss or whatever. So like these claims he's making about conservatism or neoconservatism, don't really want to get into right now. Hotep. The claims he's making about neoconservatism, we don't really need to look up, but we can, right? So like let's get into it, right? Neoconservatism. Like let's just look up neoconservatism. Like neoconservatism origins. And let's see what the fucking Google demons have to say. So it originated in the 1960s, 70s in the United States, arising from a group of disenchanted liberals and left-leaning intellectuals, many associated with the anti-Stalinist left who recoiled from the counterculture of the new left and perceived failures of democratic foreign policy. They shifted towards conservatism, favoring assertive pro-democracy foreign policies and defending traditional culture values. Now, let's see. Let's see. We going to dive deeper, and then we're gonna check and see if things that that Jay mentioned are indeed true when it comes to neoconservatism. Because this is how this conversation started. So we're gonna see if even the initial claims that Jay made were true.
The Bush,
right? Because as far as I know, some of the stuff he was saying was true, but some of the stuff he was saying was a little bit off in the beginning of the conversation when it was just about the politics, at least on the facts of the politics. Now, his historical interpretation and his philosophical interpretation of some of this stuff might differ, which might be why the AI might say he's incorrect or something, right? Because sometimes when you do your own research, your conclusions differ from the consensus, right? So let's review what he just said again.
Father of Samuel Huntington, who wrote books that influenced the Bush administration. So the Bush, Cheney, those are like sort of the arch neocons, but it's actually out of the UK from Bernard Lewis. And then they are also influenced by Leo Strauss, who was influenced by Hitler.
So it's like what he said. So like, what about, so I'm just asking the AI, what about Bernard Lewis? I know that name. Just gonna pretend I don't, right? We're just acting as if we don't have any information in it, right? And what about Bernard Lewis and Leo? I don't know their name. I don't know how their names are actually spelled, but I'm sure the AI will know who I'm talking about, right? If they're real and they're actually connected to this idea. While the first wave of neoconservatism was rooted in domestic policy, Leo Strauss and Bernard Lewis provided the movement with its later philosophical and geopolitical foundations, particularly concerning foreign policy. Okay, Leo Strauss, the philosophic father. A German Jewish political philosopher at the University of Chicago, whose students often called Straussians, became key neoconservative architects, right? Okay. And then Bernard Lewis, the geopolitical architect. He was the preeminent historian of Islam, interesting, who provided the movement with its own specific focus on the Middle East. Okay. So like the Bush era people, it seems like what Jay is saying is correct here, right?
But they also have an influence.
Is that the guy that made jeans?
Strauss. No.
Leo
Strauss.
And it even says 1916 to 2018. So yeah. He was a personal mentor to Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. His Lewis doctrine, the idea that the West should support democratic change in the Middle East, directly informed the invasion of Iraq. Yeah, so what Jay is saying here seems to be exactly correct, right?
It's a joke. It was a dungaree joke.
Jeans were made actually, I think, originally for communist purposes.
No.
The suits were actually.
Blue jeans was like
right? So this is where the back and forth really started, right? When he said jeans were created by the communists because they need like they needed like worker uniforms and shit or whatever, right? Now I don't think that is true. What I think happened is they like the communists fell in love with jeans. They liked the jeans as like a worker's clothing or some shit, right? Did communists is create jeans? Jeans. He said something like that, right? Ain't that what he said?
It was like American.
It was an
Actually,
underage joke. Jeans?
Strauss. No.
It's a joke. Levi Strauss.
Yo, Strauss.
It's a joke. It was an
Actually,
underage joke.
Jeans were made actually, I think, originally for communist purposes.
No.
The suits were
Blue
actually.
jeans was like a.
Well, okay, so yeah, he said they were created for communist purposes. Okay, so were jeans created? We'll just see what the AI says for communist purposes. Now, obviously, the AI is not going to tell us that they were, but yeah, they originated as like you just said, they were made during the gold rush. They originated as rugged, durable workwear for miners and laborers during the 19th century American West gold rush. In fact, during the Cold War, communist regimes in the Soviet Union and East Germany often banned or restricted blue jeans, viewing them as the symbols of Western capitalist influence, individualism, and rebellion. So Jay was wrong.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Not just wrong. The communists didn't like jeans. They viewed it as capitalist.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
And this is like, I don't think to be honest, right? I don't think the AI has any reason to lie about this. Like this is something that, as people say, don't get all your information from the AI and shit, right? Now we all pretty much knew this already. Before we looked it up, how do you say that? So sours, Hotep sours. Sours said that before we even looked it up, right? So we're not just going off the AI. We know this stuff. Sersha. All right. Sersha. Sersha or Sersha? It's Sha, right? Sersha. Hotep Sersha. But yeah, no, we're not just going off the AI, but the AI is always referencing something, right? It's even showing you here. Levi's that came from the cold, like, they got this little podcast here. They got Levi Strauss and company. Yeah, they got sources here. Yeah. Just for anybody that's like, oh, you're just using the AI, like, okay, so we do this to save time, okay? Because we be here all day.
Like American, it was like mining and.
Well, they wanted to have a standard for like in a company town, like everybody had the same outfit. So I'm not saying
Like
they didn't make.
Yeah, so like, I mean, I'd say like what Jay is saying here is just pretty much bullshit. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Somebody gonna have to
what we
tell the
just
truth,
saw,
and I'm gonna tell it.
based on what we just saw, that's bullshit. Like I said, now it doesn't mean that communists didn't use them, right? Because even if we look at the link here, I think there is a connection between some communists later on and jeans. Like some communists like jeans. Yeah, here's to say right here, like to combat the popularity of Western jeans, some communist countries eventually produced their own, such as Winston or Goldfucks. That's hilarious. That's the name. That's the name of their jeans in Germany. Goldfucks. Okay. That's fucking hilarious. That sounds like a Jewish name.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
I quit. These were often unpopular, uncomfortable, and low quality, leading to nicknames like parody on jeans. Rather than being created for communism, jeans were viewed as a threat to it. So, yeah, like, it's just not. Jay, like this, and this is why I said, when the conversation was on politics, Jay was like, yeah, I don't know about this shit this nigga saying here, right?
Make profits. I'm just saying, like a company town, you could say it's
Levi Strauss invented blue jeans, and it was in the United States. Denim work pants, but it was made by in San Francisco.
company town.
You made everything. What are you kidding me?
You mean in the U.S. it was like company towns?
Like a company town is not really a capitalist institution. Like
Now, he's not not necessarily wrong on that, right? Not necessarily.
They make money, but like you have to buy everything from the company town. So
Well,
Yeah, like it's not.
I disagree with that. I mean,
Listen,
if there's a barren
continue.
wasteland and a company's like, we need to import a bunch of people and there's no industry here, then they have to create means by which people can choose to buy food.
but it's not classical libertarian free market if everybody has to shop at the company town. It might be the
Yeah, like so he's right about that. But the thing is, typically company towns aren't forcing you to do that. It's just that it's more convenient, right?
But again, the point is, if no town exists and they build it, they're sure it's like a commissary.
There's other options, right?
So I wouldn't call it communist.
Well,
It's called monopolistic.
okay, but if you're libertarian, monopolistic capitalism.
Yeah, they have a monopoly, and it's not even necessarily because they created the monopoly. It's just because they're like, there's nobody else there. You know, like first in, best dressed. Like literally just first in. You don't even have to be best dressed. They're just the first in.
Isn't classical libertarianism. Also,
Again, so like if I personally have a private piece of land and I hire a bunch of people and they're like, hey, there's no restaurants anywhere, what do we eat? And I go, all right, I guess I'll have the crew coming up a restaurant, but you got to pay for the food. Is that communism?
it's, I mean, again, monopoly capitalism isn't really.
But hold on, this is not an issue of there's no competition. Like, it's an issue.
It is. There is no.
No, I mean, it's an issue of there's no competition. Not
Yeah, the communists would have tried to seize. Like, it wouldn't be a company town necessarily. Like, the idea of communism is that, like, yeah, they would seize them. Everybody would own it collectively, essentially, right? So it wouldn't necessarily be a company town. It depends on how you view communism, because a lot of people view communism from like this anarchistic perspective, like the ideal, quote unquote, like, you know, it's supposed to be like stateless. So technically it could be a company, but like if you're talking about a company, that's more in line with like capitalism, right? A company is different than like or at least a capitalist company is a little different than how some socialists and communists would deal with a company. It was what's it called again? What do they call those companies where they give the employees like partial ownership in the company, right? So like the company isn't even owned by one person, it's owned by them collectively. And then so the company town and all the stuff that the company town would be sell, it wouldn't just be like the company itself that's doing all that, because the company itself, or would be, but the company itself is built differently than it would be in a capitalist structure. Yeah, co-ops. Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, cooperatives, right? So that multiple people own it. They all own it. Everybody that's working there is invested in it as well, right? They collectively own it. That's not the same thing as having a company town where, like, I mean, you might have a single owner or a board of people who own, like, you know, different amounts of it. It's not split between all of the people that work in the company, right? So that's why I don't agree with Jay here, because again, that was what I was about to look up. So thank you. I don't have to look it up now. But yeah, like Jay's kind of half right here, right? Technically, a company town falls within the realm of like something communists could justify and do, but capitalists could as well. Like, it's not mutually exclusive.
not forcing people to do anything. So is the alternative I just go, you know what, guys, I'm going to open a restaurant where only I get to eat. You're actually not allowed to eat because I don't want to be a communist.
Right, but this is the same argument as to why people would own like an entire water supply, right? So if you privatize water, then no one has a right to the water.
But I'm not talking about that. I'm saying,
right, like, so, like, and then they got to this, like, if you privatize water, then nobody has a right to the water, right? It's like, that's not necessarily true, right? Because if it's privatized, that just means that, because first of all, no person can privately own like all of the water, right? If they're talking about ownership in the sense of like water, they're usually talking about like essentially like you taking a particular body of water or source of water, stream of water, or whatever, and basically sectioning it off and stopping other people from using it. That is technically ownership, but it's not ownership in the way that like other things can be owned, right? Like you can actually, well, No, well, okay, so that's a little different, right? You're technically right, but technically not, right? Technically, owning water, you can own water you can own like a bottle of water, right? It doesn't matter where you got that water from. You could own like a bottle of water, right? And this is what I mean by like owning land and like, you know, actual bodies of water and shit are different than owning like items, right? Because at the very basis, we all kind of share the land and everything else. So if somebody wants to take ownership of something like land or a water source, it's not like they can just take it and put it in their pocket or put it in their bag like you can, like a bottle of water or a fucking rock or something, right? it's something that has to be sectioned off, and you have to actively keep other people from taking it, because other people would be just as able of like, you know, setting up a house on the land, or you know, just taking a cup and taking some of your water, right? Like other people are capable of doing that, and they can get access to it without having to do a lot. So you have to do a lot in order to stop them from doing so, and that's where it gets into weird territory with like ownership and shit. But it can work at different levels. It doesn't have to just be scarce. It's really just a matter of like force and the person's ability to defend it, because, you know, protecting that bottle of water is not going to be as easy as protecting this entire body of water, right?
There's a company town could own the water.
Indeed. What right do you have to take it? That's communist.
Right, the company town could own the water. Like, this is why we're getting into like a weird territory, because it's like, okay, does company town exist where there's a government or not, or whatever? Because like technically, if you have a government there, a state there, they're gonna have like primary like ownership, quote unquote, of the water, right? And especially if it's like some kind of communist state or whatever, right? Everybody collectively under the state owns it. So the company in a communist country would most likely be an extension of the state, because that's how most of them work, unless it's a country like China. And even then, it's still kind of an extension of the state, right? They let the companies kind of operate on their own as much as they can, but they always have somebody there like kind of watching them. They're keeping them in check, right? But in a real, like, you know, free market capitalist country, it's like, yeah, sure. The water could be owned by a company that's completely private, but in a communist country, likely would not just be the company. Again, it would be like the collective. Everybody would own it together, even if it's just like, oh, well, the government owns it, and we collectively, you know, we make up the government, so we all own it together. That's likely how that would work.
It's not communist to have
Wait, hold on,
public municipalities.
Wait, what?
It's not.
I own a swath of land.
Right.
Wait, so what did he say? Hold on. He said it's not communist to have public municipalities?
I'm saying there's
a company town could own the water.
Indeed. What right do you have to take it? That's communist.
It's not communist to have
Wait, hold on,
public municipalities.
Now, he said it's not communist to have public municipalities, right? So what he's talking about is, Tim just said it would be communist to take away the company's ownership of the water, right? And the reason Jay said it's not communist to have public municipalities is because, well, that's essentially, or sorry, it's,
wait, what?
he said public municipalities, right?
It's not communist to have
Wait, hold on,
public municipalities.
Wait, what?
Yeah, public municipality. Because if you have a public municipality, they're going to be essentially the ones who have, you know, control, because that's a state at that point, right? So I'm sure everybody knows what a public municipality is, but just for reference, right? I'm going to pull it up here, right? Is a defined local administrative... Hey, yo, man, leave me the fuck alone. Is a defined local administrative unit such as a city, town, borough, or village that operates as a self-governing corporate entity under state law, right? A self-governing corporate entity, that actually sounds kind of similar to a company, doesn't it? I'm just saying.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Right? but it says under state law, right? These entities like urban communities, and I don't know why they say Cuyahoga County, but possess authority to manage public services, including police, fire protection, sanitation, water, and local infrastructure, right? So the state gives them authority to manage these things. But in order to manage it, they essentially have to give them a certain level of dominion over it, right? They have a certain level of ownership over it, right? Because how can you put somebody in charge of managing something, right? Let's say you own a property, right? How are you going to put somebody in charge of managing it if you don't own it? How's that work? Right? So the idea of like public ownership or collective ownership of certain resources or public services is not inherently communist. That's why he used the word public municipalities, because a public municipality could do that. If a private company were to own like a water source or something like that, they could come in and take it from them, and it wouldn't be communist to do that, because that exists under other frameworks of law, right? Like even I think even in the monarchy, you could have something like that happen, right? Because if the king decides, we own this water source now, nigga, which typically, I think the king typically owns all the land, not all of it, but like most of it. And then like, other royalty owns like other parts of land. Like if the king decides he wants to take the shit, he can take the shit. That's not communist, right? It might be authoritarian. You could argue it's authoritarian, but that's not communist, right? And I think that's the point that Jay is making here.
It's not.
I own a swath of land,
right?
And I invite you to come work on it.
Right.
I have to now relinquish my right to the water body of my property.
No, I'm saying if you're going to create a society or civilization, and if you own the entirety of
we're talking
the
about
water
company
supply,
towns. We're talking about company
well,
towns.
that's the beginning of civilization, right? It's no different.
Right. So the point you bring up.
Yeah, it is the beginning of a civilization.
Is that if I own, let's say, 100 acres?
Yeah, the king owns the land, and the lords pay taxes to him. Yeah, they do. But sometimes some of the other lords, especially if they're because the thing is, it's not just the king, right? It's the royal family, and then a lot of the time, like like a duke or something, like sometimes that the king's brother is like a duke. I think a lot of the time that's how it works, or some shit like that. The other family members and shit will have land of their own. They'll have like estates of their own, and territories of their own as well, too, depending on the kingdom.
And I have a.
And then like if a certain member of royalty, like loses their land or something, a lot of the time it just goes right back to the king.
A grain mill on it, and then I can't produce that much. So a handful of people are like, "Howdy, good sir. We could increase the output of the grain if you let us come." And I say, "All right, you know what? I'm going to I'll pay you guys a share of the grain that you mill. Thank you for voluntarily coming and offering this service." They then say, "There's nowhere to eat for miles." And I go, "Well, unfortunately, if I were to create something by which you could purchase food, that would be communism. So no."
It's not communism.
So then if I as the landowner and the company owner,
Yeah, no, that's not communism.
and say, "I will open a restaurant on the property for you, from which you can purchase goods," that's the beginning of communism.
So, but you're describing a situation of a small microcosm where there's no competition.
Like a company town.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Right. Like Tim is putting this in this very isolated scenario where there's no other competition around. Like there's zero competition already. And these people are coming in with where there's zero competition. There's nothing there. There's nowhere else for people to buy stuff. I think that what Jay is talking about is in circumstances where that's not the case, right? Because to be fair, communism didn't pop up when there was like nothing else in the world. If it was communism, there wouldn't be any, technically that's true. Because and that's the thing about like they quote unquote share everything and shit, right? Because that's how a lot of communes operate, right?
Well, there's no competition. Doesn't capitalism require competition?
Because they collectively own everything. They would only be selling and only like in be engaging in trade really with people outside. Because if it's communist, why would you be charging? Like you all collectively own these things. Like in a lot of communes I've seen, they they kind of like check things in and out. If somebody else is using it, then you just have to wait until they're done with it, or go find it somewhere else or find another one.
And who's stopping people from opening a restaurant across the street?
Well, you would if you have a company.
No. If I own property, and
You said
people say-
monopoly capitalism. You would be then stopping the competition in a monopoly capitalist situation.
No. We're talking about a company town, right? Privately owned property.
Right.
So do they have to relinquish their water rights?
If the city, if it
You don't have to stop. So like, if you have a monopoly in capitalism, you don't necessarily have to stop any other competition or anything. If you corner the market on something, you're the only one with the item or the only one with this commodity. You just have a monopoly already.
if it grows to a certain size,
Now, if somebody pops up and you shut them down, then you're maintaining the monopoly by shutting down competition. But you don't necessarily have to acquire a monopoly by shutting down competition.
is where you begin to have competition.
That's literally communism.
No, it's not.
Seizing the assets from the private landowners.
No, I'm
literally going to a guy who owns land and says, "There's too many people here now, so your water is ours." That's communism.
Sounds like
Literally
communism.
Now, that's not communism. That could be authoritarian, but it's not communism necessarily.
To me, Jay.
If you grow to where you have a society that requires competition,
Then the people can seize your assets. Agreed. We're communists.
if there's but first of all, by the way, Marx was a libertarian, so
As if there's competition. And this was the craziest thing. This is the craziest thing I heard, right? Marx was a libertarian. Where was Marx a libertarian? This is the biggest issue I have with what Jay said here. Everything else after this was pretty much fine. But I need to here's the question, right? Let's ask the Google demons, why would someone say, I just want to know why someone would say this so we can understand what his argument could be, right? Why would someone say Karl Marx was a libertarian? Like, you might be able to say he was an anarchist. I don't know about a libertarian. So here it says here, right? Bro, I'm so tired of Google. All right. Some argue Karl Marx was a libertarian because he aimed for a stateless, classless, and moneylender-free society where the development of each is the condition for the free development of all. While he supported state action to transition to communism, his ultimate vision emphasized human emancipation and workers' self-management, which resonates with certain anti-authoritarian or libertarian socialist traditions. So the reason I have an issue with this coming from Jay is because he is someone who like what's this shit? Here we go. He is someone who considers himself to be a good debater, I would say. And he also likely considers himself to be aware of certain fallacies that one could make when making an argument. You know what I'm saying? Why the fuck, what's wrong with this site right now? For some reason, this site just doesn't want to fucking work. Hold on, give me a second. I don't know why this shit just don't want to work all of a sudden. It's not showing anything. It's just a complete white screen on this fucking site, which has never been the case before. I don't know, like somebody must have fucked up their site recently. Like whoever like edits this shit. Yeah, this is crazy. It's so fucking annoying too. So I guess we might just have to stick with this. Like this is another reason, right? I'm probably not gonna be streaming that much, but this shit really be getting on my nerves. Like, I hate when I start doing something and then like I got technical issues before I start a stream and shit, and I got to sit here for like 30 minutes to do it. That shit irritating. I would rather just go
Somebody
live.
gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
So I don't even be wanting to go live sometimes. I'm just like, I know I'm gonna have to sit here for like a fucking half an hour or some shit to fix everything that went fucking wrong on OBS over like, the span of like one fucking night or some shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, this shit get on my fucking nerves. It get on my fucking nerves. And now, like, sites I reference like all the fucking time, right? Just like my go-to shit. So all of a sudden, like the fucking landing page is fucked. It's just a white screen. Shit ain't fucking working. Man, what's the point?
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
This shit be getting on my fucking nerves, bro. Bro, it's just annoying because like this is the easiest thing to reference and damn near the only thing to reference for certain fallacies, because he wrote a book on 300 fallacies. You know, a lot of them are different versions of the same fallacy, but they manifest differently. So I like to use his site as a reference, but it's just like, for some fucking reason, this shit don't want to work right now. So Bo Bennett, get your fucking shit together. Nigga.
Somebody
Like,
gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
whoever the fuck edits your site, get that shit together, bro. Get that shit together. This is that's the only place to reference like the site for the book. Otherwise, like I'd have to pull up the book and go through it. And ain't nobody got time for that shit. So we just gonna use this. So I think, let's see here. It's a little it's a little more difficult to kind of search stuff on this site, but I think part is it incomplete comparison? Is this one? No, this isn't it. Hold on. It's like, I think it's composition. Here, hold on. I normally don't have to look through it like this. I just can't remember the name of the fallacy itself, like the exact name. No, okay, it's composition. It is composition. Like, all right, so you see here, fallacy of composition and division makes the assumption that one part of something would apply to the whole, or that the whole must apply to all parts. So when you, like, people tend to do stuff like this in philosophy, right? And the reason I was looking for the other source is because it had a bit of a different name for this one, right? And then, like you said, see, it says here, this is a common fallacy. People do this a lot, right? So an example of it would be like here, right? The fallacy of composition specifically. Each part of this chair is cheap, so the whole chair for sale must be cheap, right? Or healthy brains think. So healthy brains are comprised of nothing but brain cells. Healthy brains think. Healthy brains are comprised of nothing but brain cells, right? Premise 1, healthy brains think. Premise 2, healthy brains are comprised of nothing but brain cells, which is, I mean, we just know that that's factually incorrect, right? So that's a false premise as well. If healthy brains think, then the individual brain cells can think too, right? You see how that's an issue? Like, just because a brain can think doesn't mean the part of the brain can think, right? So when we're talking about Karl Marx and why somebody would say that Karl Marx is a libertarian, the reason that this is like you could probably say that this is I would say that this is a fallacy of composition, because it's like, okay, each part of this chair is cheap, so the whole chair for sale must be cheap, right? Now, they're not saying each part of Karl Marx philosophy falls in line with anti-authoritarian or libertarian ideas. They're saying that some of them do, but it would still be the same fallacy. It's like, you would basically be saying, because some of these ideas here fit with libertarian, right? Therefore, and Karl Marx, or these ideas fit within libertarianism. Karl Marx shares these ideas. Therefore, Karl Marx is a libertarian. That is a fallacy.
Fallacies, 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 fallacies.
It does not follow.
Fallacies, fallacies.
Right? When we're talking about logic and we're talking about fallacies, the biggest problem with a lot of the fallacies is that even if they're informal, right? Because this is an informal fallacy, which means you could say this in an informal setting. You don't have to be in a debate. Again, the majority of the time when people make arguments, it's another reason I wish that I could get this fucking site to work. You don't have to be in a debate in a debate to fall for a fallacy. That's why I told y'all earlier, right? The reason the stream is called "Where Are We Gonna Go From Here?" At least everywhere but YouTube, is because I'm not trying to fall for the sunken cost fallacy, right? Just because I've invested so much into this doesn't mean I have to continue doing it if I know it's not going to go anywhere and it's just going to continue to waste my time in the future, right? That has nothing to do with a debate. I'm not debating anybody about that, right? I'm not arguing with anybody about that. I'm reasoning for myself. And what you don't want to do when you're thinking about things that have to do with your personal life is you don't want to fall for fallacies during that either. Right? You don't want the things you believe to be based on flawed reasoning, especially if you're trying to justify them or convince somebody else to believe it, because it's not going to convince them, right?
It gets really.
Well, we're not talking
ambiguous
about. I don't care about Marx. Marx was a little.
Well, you're accusing me of communism, then that.
No,
that
I'm not accusing you. I'm arguing
That's the argument
that
is communism.
if your argument is private land ownership is void upon excess population, that's literally a function of communism. That's what the Venezuelans did.
What you're describing is literally just communism itself. A company town is essentially the same as a communist setup. That's,
It is not.
it is identical.
It's
No, it's
completely-
not.
No, it's not.
So the people.
See, like, and this is the thing, right? Jay is not completely incorrect here. I just wanted to fix that. Jay is not completely incorrect here. But again, it's not mutually exclusive.
People own the land
In a company town?
in a company town. The people are the people. The people have. If we're talking about the structures of communism by which there is.
It's 'cause let's put it like this, right? We asked the Google demons: can company towns exist within communism and capitalism? And how would that look? Because we talked about that earlier, right? How it would look. It would probably look more like a co-op in the communist sense, but in the capitalist sense, it would be more like a homestead or something like that, right? Oh shit! Hold on, I didn't mean to do that. So I don't know why I turned caps on by accident. I guess here. Says, yes, company towns can exist within both capitalist and communist systems, but they can differ significantly on their purpose, ownership structure, and nature of control over residents, right? So let's break it down a little bit more. A company town is typically privately owned, isolated community where a single corporation owns the housing, stores, and infrastructure, acting as both employer and landlord to maximize profit and worker retention, right? That does not sound communist, right?
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Right? All they're doing is creating a place so that they can be your employer and your landlord, therefore making more money off of you. that is capitalist, you know what I'm saying?
Somebody
Like,
gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
that's capitalist. That's capitalist. Now, under communism, this is why I said this would look a little different. The company is replaced by the state. And even if it is a company, that company is owned by the state or works in tandem with the state, right?
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Creating monotowns, monograd, or socialist company towns, right? They specifically have to call them socialist company towns because, generally speaking, it doesn't seem to be that this is associated with communism. Jay disagrees. Where a state-run enterprise manages local economy, services, and housing to meet central production targets. Now, this is interesting here because even though it's not necessarily referred to as a company town, when Jay said it's not communist to have a public municipality, let's look again at what a public municipality is, right? It says here that a public municipality is a defined local administrative unit, such as a city, town, borough, or village, that operates as a self-governing corporate entity under state law. Now, from what I'm looking at here, a public municipality seems more akin to a company town under communism than it does in a capitalist system. It's a contradiction. However people think of communism, they think the state owned everything. Yeah, and to be fair, Marx kind of had like this stateless idea. They have this stateless ideal and they're in favor of the state kind of being a way to achieve this ideal. But at the end of the day, it still kind of means that communism itself is given, like, is okay with the state having a certain amount of power in order to achieve certain end, right? But yeah, I mean, if you're under a communist system, I mean, the company, Monotown sounds a lot like a public municipality, because it's state run. It's a state run enterprise, right? And it manages the local economy, services, and housing to meet central production targets, not to maximize profit and worker retention, but to meet central production targets, right? So public municipalities are a lot more similar to communism, a lot more similar to communism. I just thought that was interesting because Jay himself said that it's not communist to have public municipalities, but they do seem to operate very similar to the way a company town would under communism.
Is a private committee, and there's two ways we can look at it. Your argument seems to fuse together both the authoritarian dictatorship components and the economic.
That's monopoly capitalism. That's what you're arguing
If
for.
the argument is people can voluntarily choose to come and work for a company,
Monopoly capitalism. Let's see. Let's look up what monopoly capitalism is to see if this falls in line with what Jay is saying. No, obviously, I don't even think this is like a term of its own necessarily. At least I'm not used to hearing it. I'm used to hearing about monopolies in reference to capitalism. I've never heard somebody continuously use monopoly capitalism as like a term itself, but I understand what it means just from the words themselves, right? So let's see. Is that the monthly review? Let's see what Google says. They're getting this from John Carroll. The term monopoly capitalism is used to describe an aspect or stage of capitalism in which money control is widespread and explicit through the ideological fiction of free markets and competition, though the ideological fiction of free markets and competition is still maintained in public discourse. Sure. A company town would be monopoly capitalism. I think it's kind of obvious. It's only if there's no competition, right? In the scenario that Tim is talking about.
but there is no competition because there's no market reason for it. It's not communism. It's just a monopoly. But there's no oppression.
Monopoly in the truest sense cannot exist without a state. It's basically socialism, aka crony capitalism. That's technically true. I think the only problem there is like technically a private company can achieve a monopoly through use of force.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
And the thing is, the reason you're saying like it can't exist without a state is because the state usually has the monopoly on force.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
But in a situation where you don't have a state and a private company has the monopoly on force, well, then they can have the monopoly on pretty much anything because they can beat out the competition with force. You know what I'm saying?
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
And it doesn't matter because you can always choose to leave.
You can always choose to leave if you're out in the middle of.
You can't. And okay, so that is the libertarian idea, right? Like voluntary.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
And that is the main reason why Jay is wrong about this being communist, right? Because you are volunteering to be a part of this. Nobody's forcing you to be a part of it. Nobody's forcing you to collectively own this, right? This is privately owned, and you are choosing to work for this employer who is also providing you a place to live and places to buy things.
Nowhere.
Why did you go there?
In the West? And in like
Again, bro, I got to tell you, if the argument is I have no choice in my circumstances, therefore I should get public rights, it's literally
That's not what I said.
This guy's a communist.
So then leave, right? Why can't you
Well,
leave?
you can say that, but in a company town, especially like in situations when in the 1800s company towns were being set up, you didn't have the ability to just leave,
Why
right?
not?
Well,
They're holding you at
You
gunpoint.
did.
I mean, well, if you're under a contract, you might have to be there.
Why did you sign the contract?
Well,
Is
again,
it communism to voluntarily enter into a
Right.
private
Yeah.
company?
You signed the contract. No, see, Tim is right here. Tim is right now.
yeah, but you can call it voluntary. Even there's situations where something can be voluntary that you're actually locked into, right? I mean, I can.
You chose to enter into a contract.
I mean, okay, so like that wouldn't be voluntary. That would be coercion. So like, so everybody knows what coercion is. And this is the reason why libertarians actually don't consider something to be voluntary if it's not free from coercion. Coercion is the practice of forcing or manipulating, right? Keyword here for coercion is manipulating. Manipulating someone to act against their will through threats of violence, harm, or in some cases, psychological manipulation, right? So you might be convinced to sign a contract because of psychological manipulation, blackmail, extortion, right here, right? Or intimidation. But they're not like, they don't necessarily have to, because intimidation would be force, right? Extortion and blackmail don't really have to be forced. They could just, if they have something on you, you could argue, some people might argue that it's force, soft power. So it's more soft power, right? They could get you to sign something that might seem voluntary. And it's like, well, it's technically voluntary, but is it really voluntary if you're under threat? Or if there's something that that they're going to do to you if you don't?
Amazon owns an entire area and it's the only place to work, then to say, well, you can move and you can do that. Yeah. But it's still a form of wage slavery, right? You don't think there's such thing as
No,
wage
I don't.
slavery?
I think that's commie talk.
Well,
I think this is quite literally the arguments of Chavez.
I mean, you can be a wage slave. Being a wage slave would be more like being an indentured servant. You know what I'm saying?
And the arguments of Bernie Sanders. And my point that I often bring up to these leftists is, what's stopping you from just being a vagrant on federal land?
There's no difference.
You want from my system without input. And that is the component of the left that I disagree with.
No, your argument is a leftist argument, actually.
That people should have to work for
classical liberalism is a leftist position. You argue classical liberalism. That's it.
Now, this is another interesting thing, right? Now, I'm not Goldstein, right? I'm just, I'm not Goldstein. So I don't have any clips to show y'all from my previous call-ins to what was formerly known as the Griff Report. But this is actually something I talked about with Hotep one of the times that I called in, and I forgot about this, partially because I was listening at work when I called in on Friday. I forgot about this when I first heard it. This is an argument I made to Hotep. This is literally an argument I made to Hotep when I called into the show, when he was talking about communism. And I called in and I was like, we got to stop acting like liberalism wasn't like just early communism. You wouldn't have even got Marx or half of these socialists or any of this shit if it hadn't started with some of the fundamental ideas or even the idea of rights that liberalism posited. Because if you accept a lot of those negative rights, then a lot of other stuff can be extrapolated from that, right? Because the entire idea of negative rights is that it's not necessarily saying that you have these things. It's saying that another person can't do something to you or can't stop you from doing these things, and therefore implying that you have a right to these things, like the Bill of Rights does. Right? You get your rights because it tells the government what the government can't do. It doesn't write out a list of things of what you can do. Right? That's why they're called negative rights. But this is why this conversation got into rights.
It's a classic leftist position.
What I'm arguing for merit-based capitalism is leftist.
Yes.
Because they're talking about, like what Jay just said. He said liberalism is basically just like communism light. Like
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Which is the shit I said years ago when I was talking to Hotep. And he actually agreed at the end of that conversation, if I'm not mistaken. I was like, we got to stop. We should just start referring to it as liberalism. You got to be honest about it. There's barely a difference between liberalism and communism.
Classical liberalism, out of the Enlightenment.
That is incorrect.
No, out of the Enlightenment, classical liberalism.
But this is also the kind of argument he's using to say that Marx is a libertarian, which I would disagree with. But again, I understand the argument. And that's why I looked it up, on the Google demons to have them explain it to you so that you could see why someone might make that argument, even if it's slightly fallacious.
The origin of the left is the left aisle in the French Revolution, referring to those who wanted a socialist, anti-monarchist, and the right wanted a top-down monarchist system. Okay, so
and Tim is right.
Not in the French Revolution, no.
It was the French Revolution. It was the left and the right.
The French Revolution wanted a constitutional monarchy on the right, and they wanted private property on the right. The leftists wanted communism.
Indeed. So when we say left and right in an economic sense, it refers to left meaning communal, right meaning closer laissez-faire.
That's classical liberalism, which is against the traditional position of church and state.
And this is the argument that Carl makes about liberalism now.
What's the argument?
Yeah, that Sargon of Akkad. This is I'm only saying that they're similar. That liberalism is actually a creation of the left, and that the ultimate.
Exactly. Yeah. So what Phil is saying here, he's exactly right. So Carl, he's talking about Carl Benjamin, not Karl Marx. He's talking about Carl Benjamin.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna
And
tell
if
it.
you know who Carl Benjamin is, Sargon of Akkad, he likes to dabble in philosophy himself. And this is an argument that Carl makes as well, that liberalism is just like communism light, that all of these ideas that exist within liberalism ultimately lead to communism no matter what. So the argument that Jay is making here is technically correct. And it's an argument I've made before myself.
But I am not advocating for.
And it's actually an argument that a lot of conservatives make.
Or in this circumstance, classical liberalism. I'm advocating for private rights.
Yeah, but the point that I'm making is that his perspective is similar to Carl's perspective.
Sure, but that's immaterial to the argument being made.
It's not, because
it's not. See, and this is where you can see Tim is just being indignant at this point, because even Phil was able to step in and say, I understand the argument he's making because I've heard someone else that we know make this exact same argument. Someone else who's also been on the show. Someone else who Tim considers to be a friend. Sargon of Akkad. So this is not a new argument, and it is definitely in line with what you guys are talking about.
because what you're saying that you're a socialist, you're a Marxist, but what I'm arguing would be the same as any medieval village philosophy, and they weren't Marxists or socialists back in the Middle Ages. Like if you went to a French village in the 1100s.
Okay, again, if the core of your argument.
And even I think more recently, like even Hotep has been making the argument that mercantilism is basically like communist, which is like then you get into a realm where it's like, you know, words low key don't mean anything, you know. So that's why I'm like, that's why I went over that particular fallacy of like, you know, composition and division. Just because they share similarities and shit doesn't mean we can say the entirety of the thing is the same. That doesn't follow. But you can understand why somebody might be saying it, right? And even if it's not entirely the same thing, you could say that they are very similar, right? You could say that, like I said, the reason I don't say liberalism is communism, I say it's communism light, is because you can get the idea through without making a claim that you can't substantiate, right? Because when you actually dig into that claim, you find out, well, it's not true, right? That's fallacious.
Argument is there's a private landowner. 20 years later, there's now 300 people working in this land. Mm-hmm. We now transfer the private rights from the landowner to a communal function.
Again, it's complex when you have something like the total ownership of something like a water supply, right?
Yep.
So when you have people that need that, that's different than a situation where Nestle's trying to buy an entire country's like private water supply.
So again, the issue is company towns. I have 100 acres. I own the body of water on that land. Mm-hmm. I invite a bunch of people to work. They say, I'll work here. I need a place to stay. I say, I'll build you a house. They say, where do I get food? I'll build a store. And they say, we need water. I say, I'll set up a water pump for you. That's communism.
Well, let's go to the rights then, because you're arguing that you have this right as a company owner.
Like, and see, like what they're talking about here, like this is one of those like complicated philosophical things where you really have to, especially when you get into like politics, it's like, does anybody have a right to something that everybody needs to survive? Well, then technically we all have a right to it, obviously, because we need it to survive. If we're just gonna have a basic justification for why someone has a right or what a right is, it's like if somebody needs something to survive and they're not allowed to acquire it or they're being kept from acquiring it, the majority of us would consider that wrong, right? Or detrimental. So if we're actually trying to we're trying to create a society that's not detrimental to people's survival, then we might have to make it like a rule, and it might make sense to make it a rule that people have a right to this thing, and that depriving people of this thing is wrong, right? Or in short, because it could get a lot more complicated than that. It gets very deep when you're actually talking about this on a philosophical level, because you have to justify why everybody should accept that, right? Because if other people are like, well, I just want it, like, fuck them. Well, why should they have a right to it? You know what I mean? Like, you have to give them a reason why that makes sense to them. Not even necessarily just make sense to them, but make sense in general, right? So you said you have an issue to what you have an issue to issue with? You said you have an issue with it to a degree, but you see where he's coming from. Given the time period the worm came about, there was no communism. You talking about the mercantilism thing we were talking about, or liberalism?
Private water supply.
Right,
That's what
so
I'm
again,
referring to.
the issue is company towns. I have 100 acres. I own the body of water on that land. I invite a bunch of people to work. They say, I'll work here. I need a place to stay. I say, I'll build your house. They say, where do I get food? I'll build a store. And they say, we need water. I say, I'll set up a water pump for you. That's
Well-
communism.
Well, let's go to the rights then, because you're arguing that you have this right as a
Yeah. So what Tim described is not communism. It's just like it's literally just like supply and demand, right? Like there's a demand for a thing, and the demand just happens to come from your workers. Yeah. I understand what he means. Yeah.
as a company owner, and I would agree. But
But yeah, it was like, again, right? Like you could just say like something like mercantilism is communism light, right? Or they share like the same ideas. But you could at least be like, because I think the point he made is that like private ownership and stuff like that was like, that wasn't something that they really believed in anyway, because they always had like these ideas that kind of eschewed that entire concept. But mercantilism wasn't the only one. Even feudalism was like that. That's the thing, right? Like the Lord owned everything under feudalism.
on what basis do you have those rights? Because classical liberalism lost this whole argument. When it came
I don't know why you're bringing up classical liberalism. It's not a
That's your
component.
position.
No, it isn't.
It is. You're not aware of that, but it is your position.
No, you're throwing a blanket to encompass one point and combine it with a bunch of other points.
Because your arguments come out of that ethos, whether you know it or not. They're classical liberal
And
arguments.
you can have varying ideologies mix and match. Let's make an argument.
So
Actually,
Yeah, you can. And that's the key there, right?
On what basis
And
do
this
you
is
have
the
those
problem
rights?
with the
Because
back and
classical
forth.
liberalism lost this whole argument when it came
I don't know
out.
why you're bringing up classical liberalism. It's not a
That's your
component.
position.
No, it isn't. You're
Not aware of that, but it is your.
Yeah, and to be fair, Tim's position is basically classical liberalism. He's even said that. So I don't even know why he's denying it right now. That's actually one of the things that irritated me about this back and forth. I'm like, Tim, you've literally called yourself a classical liberal multiple times before. You said you would fall into that distinction.
Your position.
No,
So
you're
why
throwing a
is it
blanket
now
to
that you're saying
encompass
you
one
don't?
point and combine with a bunch of other points.
Because your arguments come out of that ethos, whether you know it or not. They're classical liberal
And
arguments.
you can
Yeah, they do. And Jay is right about that. He's telling you like, yeah, this is like where the ideas come from. Like, it's just like, you can't really debate about that. Like, it's just like, nigga, that's the origin of America and the American ideas. They come from certain philosophers. Certain people documented this stuff. They wrote down certain ideas, like they're in the fucking Constitution.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
And that is what you're basing a lot of this on. Yes.
you can have varying ideologies mix and match. Let's make an argument. What I
So
actually
what's the
just said.
basis for the rights?
The basis for the right to own private property. Well,
Your ethos.
So I argue that the rights of man are derived from the will or the duties God bestows upon man. The requirements that we have from God, which is
Right. So like what you're hearing right now is this is Tim's defense for natural rights. Right. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna ask the Google demons, how would a classical liberal justify the concept of rights? And just tell me if this, y'all can tell me if this looks similar to to what Tim is saying, right? Because that is what he's doing. He's basically giving you the argument that a classical liberal would give you, right? So let's see here. Before Tim finishes giving his argument, I'm going to tell you what this says, and then we're going to see what Tim says, right? A classical liberal justifies rights as universal, inalienable, and inherent to human nature, not granted by government, primarily focusing on negative rights like life, liberty, and property. Grounded in human dignity and self-ownership, these rights are necessary for individual flourishing and require others to refrain from interference, right? Like I was telling you earlier, right? Classical liberals, natural law and rights, right? It's because it comes from natural law. That's the entire idea. It comes from natural law, which is the classical liberal idea that informs where rights come from. Classical liberals argue that rights are inherent to human beings by nature, often viewed as God-given or derived from human reason, rather than created by state legislation, right? Never heard of negative rights before? Yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier. So the idea of negative rights, let's see here. We'll just have the Google demons break it down in a second, right? But from what we can see here, actually it has it right here. So we see, look at it in a second, but you can see here, right? basically everything that Tim is about to say, classical liberals argue that rights are inherent to human beings in nature, often viewed as God-given or derived from human reason rather than by state legislation. So Tim just told him he wasn't a classical liberal, but he's about to sit here and explain to him like the classical liberals' view on like rights and shit. Like all this shit is coming from classical liberal ideology, right? So negative rights here, you said you haven't gone over this before. Rights are seen as a freedom from interference, right? So like freedom of speech, association, and contract. What I don't know why this is contract. You have freedom of contract. I don't think that's a thing, but either way, freedom of speech is a good example, right? The government says you cannot infringe on these things, right? The Bill of Rights says, the government can't infringe on these things. It doesn't say you can do these things, right? So the reason they call it negative rights is because it says rather than rights to goods or services focusing on limiting the state's role, right? So and that's why it says freedom from interference. Because once it tells the state that you can't do this thing, what's implied from that, association and contract should be one thing. Yeah. But what can be implied from telling the government that they can't do certain things or can't stop you from doing certain things is the idea that you inherently have a right to do that thing. You're entitled to that thing, right? So that's why they call them negative rights, because they're not affirmed in the positive. They're affirmed in the negative. If you understand what that means. Like, does that make sense? They're affirmed in the negative because they're telling the government that they can't stop you from doing these things. They can't infringe on these things. Therefore, you can imply this is a thing that you're allowed to do, the thing that you are supposed to do, right? Like I could break it down a little bit more, but that's the simplest way to break it down.
Is be fruitful and multiply requires a handful of things for which we recognize in the United States that we allow other people to do. Fully recognizing that other groups have different ideas of what rights are. So I would argue rights are we need to be able to communicate, we need to be able to protect ourselves, and we need to be secure in our possessions. These are principal. Right.
So like listen to what Tim just said. Like he just said he wasn't a classical liberal, right? But what is he telling you, right? Remember, I'm gonna leave it on the screen actually. You don't need to see his face. You don't need to see it. Okay. I'm gonna leave it on the screen right here. Justifies rights, universal, inalienable, inherent in human nature, is not granted by government, focusing on the negative rights, human dignity, self-ownership, yada, yada, right? They're going to say they're inherent human beings, God-given, right? All that good stuff. Well, let's hear it from the top.
And you can have varying ideologies mix and match. Let's make an argument on what I actually just said.
You're not aware of that, but liberalism lost this whole argument. But
I don't know why you're bringing up classical liberalism. It's not
that's your position.
No, it isn't.
It is. You're not aware of that, but it is your position.
No, you're throwing a blanket to encompass one point and combine it with a bunch of other points.
Because your arguments come out of that ethos, whether you know it or not. They're classical liberal.
And you can have varying ideologies mix and match. Let's make an argument on what I actually just said.
What's the basis for the rights?
The basis for the right to own private property? Well, now we're...
your ethos.
So I argue that the rights of man are derived from the will or the duties God bestows upon man. The requirements that we have...
All right, so you hear that? Derived from the wills or the duties God bestows upon them. Now, what does it say right here? Classical liberals argue that rights are inherent to human beings by nature, often viewed as God-given or derived from human reason. Now, he says they're derived from God. That's the same thing as God-given. But he also, when he goes on to explain more, he defaults to human reason as well.
From God, which is be fruitful and multiply, requires a handful of things for which we recognize in the United States.
It requires a handful of things for which you recognize. You understand that, right? So he went from these things we get from God. They require certain things. So then he starts deriving things, not just from God, but from his own human reason.
States that we allow other people to do. Fully recognizing that other groups have different ideas of what rights are. So I would argue rights are we need.
Right. And then fully recognizing that other groups have different ideas of what rights are. So again, you're realizing that you are deriving these from your own human reason, even though you're saying you're deriving them from God as well.
Be able to communicate. Right? We need to be able to protect ourselves.
This is all in line. You can see it on your screen with what classical liberals would use to defend the idea of rights.
And we need to be secure in our possessions. These are principal rights that we struggle to survive.
Right. Now, like, hear him say that one more time.
That we allow other people to do. Fully recognizing that other groups have different ideas of what rights are. So I would argue rights are we need to be able to communicate, we need to be able to protect ourselves, and we need to be secure in our possessions. These are principal. Right.
So he says we need to be able to communicate, we need to be able to protect ourselves, and be secure in our possessions. Right. Now, they say they mostly focus on life, liberty, and property. What is he focusing on right there? Property. Right? Property.
Principal rights that we struggle to survive without. As the basis of this is look at communism in general in the Soviet Union, and when you don't have property rights, congratulations, look what happens. When you have mass monopolization and oligopoly, you get something similar. So in a simple sense, certainly it is my moral worldview and faith-based structures that define what I think someone has an inherent claim to. Progressives think you have an inherent claim to someone else's labor, which I would describe as slavery. So when it comes to the idea of private land ownership, the argument is fully understanding population expansion can come to a point where some people will never own land, but the idea is I need to be secure in my possessions to know and prepare for harsh winters, for instability.
Again, securing your possessions to know all this stuff. Again, life. He's already inherently taking life as one of those rights, right? He's not saying it, but none of this stuff would matter if you didn't have a right to life, right? If you didn't have a right to live, like you don't have a right to property, like your existence. You don't have a right to even exist. Why would you have a right to own something?
Stability, so that I can survive. So that
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna
I'm
tell
just
it.
saying. I think Tim is a pop libertarian. Libertarian when it's not, and neocon when it's pop. Yeah, no, literally, he is, because wasn't that nigga like just like a month ago? This nigga was talking about some "I am the boot," like,
and that I can multiply.
So you build a Genesis and God. What God? What principles of Genesis tell you that?
What are you talking about? I'm not a Christian.
Then how are you?
This is the funniest thing about this conversation. This is what I'm saying. As soon as they got into philosophy, as soon as they started talking about rights, Jay was incorrect for some of the stuff he said earlier, but like from now on, he doesn't have to do anything.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Tim just made one of the most incoherent statements you could ever make I've ever heard anybody ever make. Like, I'm just saying, like, it's actually like he gets no points.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic
Honestly.
things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything
Tim might be a smart guy.
that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points,
I'm just saying.
and may God have mercy on your soul.
I'm just saying.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
I'm just saying. Like, did y'all hear what he just said? Just listen to this one more time. Listen to this one more time.
When it comes to the idea of private land ownership, the argument is fully understanding population expansion can come to a point where some people will never own land, but the idea is I need to be secure in my possessions to know and prepare for harsh winters, for instability, so that I can survive, so that I can be fruitful, and that I can multiply.
So you build a Genesis
Sounds very classical liberal to me.
and God. What God? What principles of Genesis tell you that?
What are you talking about? I'm not a Christian.
Then how are you going?
So he said, what are you talking about? I'm not a Christian. Like, Tim. What did he just say? Sorry, you might have missed that
People
part.
will
Hold
never
on.
own land, but the idea is progressives think you have an inherent claim to someone else's labor, which I would describe as slavery. So when it comes to the idea of private land ownership, the argument is fully understanding population expansion can come to a point where some people will never own land, but the idea is I need to be secure in my possessions to know and prepare for harsh winters, for instability, so that I can survive, so that I can be fruitful, and that I can multiply.
So you build a
See, he said, so that I can be fruitful and I can multiply. Where does that come from, guys? Can anybody tell me where be fruitful and multiply comes from? Any ideas? Anybody tell me? Anybody got any idea where be fruitful and multiply comes from? What book does that come from? What religion believes that this is something that God told them? What text would that be in? Does anybody know? Anybody have any idea? Like, I don't know. Like, it sounds familiar. It sounds like something a Christian would believe.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, especially if somebody is convincing and their logic is on point, right? Like a lot of the stuff Hotep says, it makes a lot of sense. Even if you have to walk somebody down and actually, like, learn, like, teach them the information to get them to arrive at the same conclusion. If you can be convincing in that way, which is one of the reasons why you should know about fallacies,
Somebody
right?
gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
You got to be able to know how to convince people. But yeah, HJ is a very convincing person. Very easy for him to influence somebody like Tim Pool. It's actually very easy for a lot of people to influence Tim Pool. Like, you can tell that a lot of the ideas he holds now, he hasn't fully thought through. And this is why we look at logic, philosophy, and break down this stuff here, because I don't know if y'all are familiar with the word metacognition. I think we may have gone over this before. we may have gone over this before. Metacognition is thinking about thinking, the ability to plan, monitor, and evaluate one's own learning and cognitive processes, right? So you think about how you think and how you learn, why you think you know the things you know, or why you know the things you know, or why you believe you know the things you know, right? Because if you're not doing that, you could be falling for fallacies. You could be falling for fallacious reasoning. You could be like, I should believe this thing because the majority of people believe it, which we know is like, you know, appeal to ad populum, right?
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
You shouldn't base your beliefs on what the majority of people believe. You also shouldn't base your beliefs just on what authorities believe, right? You should actually have some substantive reason for thinking that the authorities or the majority of the people are correct beyond just the fact that they think it. That shouldn't be your only justification for believing it, right? This is why this stuff is important.
The Genesis and God.
And so from the rest of this conversation, you're going to see that the way that Jay deals with Tim is because Jay is an Orthodox Christian, right? They're very involved in the philosophy and everything of Christianity because that's the only thing that really differentiates them from a lot of the Protestants, right? How they conceptualize the text, that they believe that you have to have certain authorities on interpreting the text, and that you have to understand philosophy and what is true and how to actually make an argument in order to say that certain things are true, in order to come to the conclusion that certain things that were written in biblical texts were actually, you know, meant to mean a certain thing. You have to be able to have an argument for why you think it's true. It has to be based on something. You have to have some kind of reference, some kind of source for it. Like, it gets deep, right? And if your arguments are logically flawed, they're very easy to dismiss. So what Jay is doing here is he's actually trying to get Tim straight. But because Tim is so fucking hard-headed, which I'm sure you've all seen before,
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Tim doesn't want to accept what Jay's saying. He doesn't want to understand what Jay's trying to tell him. And he gets very combative and defensive, which we've seen him do before.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
What God? What principles of Genesis tell you that?
What are you talking about? I'm not a Christian.
See, and he says, like, what principles of Genesis tell you that? The reason he brought up Genesis is because he knows, Tim, you just quoted something from Genesis. Like,
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
you thought he wasn't going to notice? And why the fuck are you mentioning shit from Genesis if you're not a Christian, nigga? Like, you sound dumb right now, Tim.
Then how are you going to base this argument for rights in God?
What do you mean?
What God?
Right? You see how Jay is not being an asshole here. He's legitimately asking him, how the fuck are you basing your rights on this shit if you're not a Christian? Like, what?
My God, my moral worldview.
So it's not a universe.
Your God, your moral worldview. Like, y'all can see how retarded Tim starts to sound as soon as we get into any like basic philosophy or justification for morals.
Universal principle is just subjective.
Well, I think to a lot of people, they have a moral worldview and a philosophical understanding of some things and not others. And I base mine largely on, first, I would argue that perhaps there are greater moral philosophies than the Christian moral structures. We just don't know them yet. I would say historically, based upon what we have seen throughout the world and what we think we know, the Christian moral worldview has been dramatically superior to other moral structures.
So,
that being said,
based on what? Right? You see how Tim probably wouldn't even be able to substantiate that. And I think Jay actually asked him that after this.
I'm not a Christian, and I don't believe in the faith structures they have. However, I've recognized that the moral structures of a Christian society tend to make life more successful for individuals, which is ultimately beneficial to the standard function of life, which is organizing organizing free energy into complex systems.
So just utilitarianism, so because it works well.
Yeah, utilitarian. That is what Tim just told him. That was a utilitarian argument. Although I think the Christian worldview seems to be superior because it works. That's basically what he said.
That was utilitarian.
You're wrong.
That's utilitarianism.
No.
Argue that it works well.
Jay, if you don't have an argument for what I said, stop trying to blanket it with something else as a straw man.
So let's see here. Let's do this. We're not even going to I'm not even going to personally tell you what I think about what Tim just said, whether or not it's utilitarian or not. Like, let's just look at the transcript. Let's take what Tim said from the transcript and let's ask the Google demons. Let's ask the AI. Let's ask the AI, Was this a utilitarian argument? Right? Like, fuck my opinion. Because niggas don't care about my opinion anyway. Niggas will hear me say some shit and they be like, oh, you're wrong. Tari don't know what he talking about. All right, then. Don't hear it from me then. I'll just show you niggas. So, let's see here. So, I'm gonna take this whole thing and we'll subtract what we need to. Okay. We'll copy and paste that. All right. Into the Google demons. And we're gonna ask them AI mode. All right. I'm not editing that. I'm gonna just see if it can weed through all of that. All right. Is this a utilitarian argument? Let's see if it can break it down without, because it has all the number stamps in there too. Your argument is a hybrid that combines utilitarianism with systems theory and evolutionary psychology, which ultimately is just, while it uses utilitarian logic, it grounds utility in physical and biological framework rather than simple happiness. Well, utilitarian isn't just about simple happiness. At its core, your reasoning is consequentialist. Yeah, okay, that's what I was going to say. Consequentialism and utilitarianism are basically the same thing. The only real difference would be that that there's kind of like there's different goals or ideals, I guess you could say. Because they're still focusing on consequences. It's just which kind of consequences are more beneficial, basically. So as you can see, like we can just click on like consequentialist here, right? Or utilitarianism. It's an ethical theory that asserts that right and wrong are best determined by focusing on outcomes of actions and choices, right? So what Tim described was basically focusing on like the effects of Christianity. He believes that Christianity is superior essentially because of the effects that it has, right? He didn't really argue anything other than that. He talked about like the effects that Christianity has on the world, the usefulness that it has in certain systems and shit, and systems theory and shit. And like it ultimately was just a utilitarian argument. And the funny thing is that when I clicked on consequentialist, it fucking, and yeah, an ethical theory that judges an action's moral correctness by its consequences, right? And then you can see utilitarianism right here is an ethical theory that determines right or wrong by focusing on outcomes. It is a form of consequentialism, right? So even though he said utilitarianism, like it was a utilitarian argument that Tim made, but it was also a consequentialist argument, which, I mean, you know, one is one and one is not the other, but one is a form of the other. So we can understand what Jay was saying here, and we just give it to him. Like, yes, that would be a utilitarian argument. If it's not a utilitarian argument, it's just a consequentialist argument, which really isn't much of a difference, right?
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
The argument was utilitarianism.
It's literally not. I did. We can talk about.
Why is it not utilitarian?
Well, we can talk about deontological ethos. We can talk about.
It has nothing to do with this.
Right.
No, indeed. My point
This
is,
and this is okay, and this is where Jay was actually the most good faith and probably had the most appropriate response to what Tim was saying. Because when he says it's utilitarianism, technically he's made the claim and he has to defend why it's utilitarianism. But because Tim was the one that had the burden, when Tim says it's not utilitarianism, he's also making a claim, right? He's making a negative claim technically, but he's also making a claim. Being that he's the one who just went through the whole spiel, though, it makes sense for Jay to ask him, well, how was it not utilitarian?
Enlightenment.
instead of arguing what I said, you're arguing thing. I'm like, well, I give you a specific outline.
Well, I'm giving you the problem with utilitarianism. I'm sorry that you're not aware of the problems with that.
I'm sorry that you can't actually address what I told you.
I'm addressing it now, which is
You're not.
He is addressing it. So you see how Tim got animated and defensive as soon as he said that, like, Well, that's utilitarian.
Utilitarian arguments are pragmatic, and it's not a justification.
Great, I'm not a utilitarian.
But you made a utilitarian argument.
Yeah, you don't have to be a utilitarian to make a utilitarian argument. Like, let's be honest here, Tim. Come on. Now.
Component of some, perhaps. So I don't believe in utilitarianism because that would sacrifice individuals.
Right.
Again, do you know what deontological moral ethos is?
Yeah, it's
okay, great. So when you say something like you're utilitarian,
so he said, "Do you know what deontological moral ethos is?" Like, I mean, like, sure, you can bring that up, Tim, but like, let's see if you fall in line with that. Like, let's just ask the Google demons. We already put the argument in here, so let's just ask the Google demons. Does this fall in line with a deontological? Yeah, they know. They guessed what I was gonna write. So let's just. Does this fall within a deontological framework? Right.
and then
But you made a utilitarian argument.
a component of some, perhaps.
Okay.
So I don't believe in utilitarianism because that would sacrifice individuals.
Right.
Again, do you know what deontological moral ethos is?
Yeah, it's
okay, great. So when
Deontological. All right. So let's just say, like, yeah, let's just say, since he said moral ethos, let's just use the words he used. Deontological moral ethos, even though the framework would be the same thing.
What the fuck?
Yeah, with this, yeah, you know what? Would this fall under a deontological moral ethos or utilitarian one? They added the end of it for me, so we'll say or utilitarian. Yeah, you know what? Which one does it fall under? It says here, the argument is firmly utilitarian. Sorry, Tim.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Specifically rule utilitarian and sits on direct opposition to deontological ethos. Oh, damn.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Sorry, Tim. Sorry, Tim. You thought.
when you say something like you're utilitarian, and then I bring up we do not take immoral actions against an individual for the betterment of I know.
So why are you bringing up Kant?
You are making an argument. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, which I did not say.
You can have different types of utilitarianism.
Sure.
You don't have to have that.
Instead of arguing the point
it's a
I
pragmatic
made.
Point. You argued a pragmatic point.
Argue the point I made. Stop trying to blanket into other
How
things.
does pragmatism justify the rights? That's what you argued.
Okay, I made an argument about private land ownership as a benefit to human survival.
Right, pragmatic.
Okay, so address what I said.
How does appealing
I
to
made
pragmatism?
a point. You make yours addressing what I said.
What, like, see, Tim, your point didn't make sense.
I know.
Especially because you are now saying that you're not a utilitarian, and that's not the type of argument you were making. Well, you didn't make the type of argument you wanted to make.
No.
So why are you bringing up Kant?
You are making an argument. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, which I did not say.
You can have different types of utilitarianism.
Sure.
You don't have to have that.
Instead of arguing the point I made.
Point. You argued a pragmatic point.
Argue the point I made. Stop trying to blanket into other things.
So, like, also, let's finish reading through this, right? Like, before we let them continue, right? Let's finish reading through why Tim is against deontological ethos, right? Now, I haven't explained to you what deontology is or deontological ethos is. Not because I can't, but because I don't feel like it. So we'll see if it goes through it. If it doesn't, oh, actually, it does right here. So yeah, we can just go through it right here. So consequence versus duties, right? Consequentialism, right? Like I said, this is a consequentialist versus duties. Like your view, and they're saying my view because I typed in Tim's view. So this is not my view, but this is Tim's view, right? So you judge Christian morality by its results, right? That's what he did, making life more successful and organizing free energy. This is the definition of consequentialism, right? Deontology, as it explains, a deontologist like Immanuel Kant, just like Jay said, so Jay was right.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Argues that an action is right or wrong based on inherent rules, regardless of the outcome. Now, I actually do kind of fall into a deontological ethos, right? So it's like, it doesn't matter if you are able to feed your family with the money that you make being a prostitute. Being a prostitute is still wrong, right? That's essentially the kind of like moral worldview you'd have if you're a deontologist, right? If a moral rule is do not lie, right? You must not lie, even if lying would help organize complex systems or make society more successful, which is the argument that's made. Instrumental versus intrinsic value. You value moral structure instrumentally. It is a technology or a tool. That's the consequentialist view. Deontology says rules have intrinsic value. Rights are trump cards that cannot be traded away for systematic efficiency. A deontologist would say that rights exist because humans are ends in themselves, not because they are efficient components of an energy organizing system. So this is the issue with Tim's argument, right? He's making a consequentialist argument, which falls more in line with utilitarianism and does not relate anything to what deontology is. And that's why Jay is taking him to task.
Does pragmatism justify the rights? That's what you argued.
Okay, I made an argument about private land ownership as a benefit to human survival.
Right, pragmatic.
Okay, so address what I said.
Right.
How does appealing
I
to
made a point.
pragmatism?
You make yours addressing what I said.
Yeah, that's not a justification. It's a bad
Explain
argument.
why.
Because appealing to things that work or pragmatism isn't a justification. It
Explain why I'm wrong.
Yes, right. So appealing to things that work isn't a justification. So again, right, in terms of logic, this is why Jay said what he said, right? So what we're going to do here is we're actually so I'm going to do the same thing we did for Tim. In fact, we're going to do something new, right? And do the same thing we did for Tim, but we're going to take Jay's statement and analyze his, right? Because Jay is correct. What Tim said is not a good argument. Not necessarily. Pragmatism is not necessarily a bad way of reasoning, but it is not a justification, right? That's what's important here, right?
About the requirement of private land ownership.
So right, appealing to things that work or pragmatism isn't a justification. Right? So let's just ask them, is this statement true? And then we're going to put in what Jay says, right? Just ask the Google demons. Don't ask Tari. Tari doesn't know anything. Just ask the Google demons, right? Whether a statement is true depends entirely on which philosophical framework you apply, right? Which is why, part of the reason why when I was talking to HJ about it, I was talking about the philosophical framework that Jay holds, not my own, because it's fucking irrelevant, right? In the conversation they're having, the one that is important is the one that Jay holds, because that's why this argument is being had. Jay and Tim, but more specifically Jay, because as you can see, Tim wants Jay to make an argument, but Jay is pointing out that, Tim, you're the one who is supposed to be justifying this idea of rights, and you still have yet to do so, right? So here's the say. This is how different schools of thought view it. From a pragmatist perspective, it's false. Philosophers like William James or James Dewey would argue that the statement is false. To a pragmatist, the truth or value of an idea is found in its practical consequences. If it works and provides a beneficial solution to a problem, that is its justification, right? So they would say that Jay is wrong, right? But from a deontological perspective or absolutist perspective, which essentially Jay would have, because it's not necessarily deontological, technically it is, because he believes in like objective morals, right? He believes that in divine command, he believes that God, commanded you to do certain things and not do certain things, right? Like the 10 Commandments and all that shit. So that would make them wrong universally. So he would be an absolutist. He might not be deontological, but he'd be absolutist. And that's why he would say that this statement is true, right? The statement that we put in here is Jay's statement. So the pragmatists would view it as false, right? But the people more like Jay would view it as true. And it's because, and even like the person that Tim brought up, right? And funnily enough, the deontologist, they would agree with what Jay said, because they argue that the action or belief must be justified by adherence to universal principles or moral laws, regardless of whether the outcome is effective or pragmatic in the moment. So it can be pragmatic, but morally speaking, that's not a justification that they're going to accept if it doesn't appeal to some universal principles or laws, or, the moral laws that would come from God, in Jay's opinion, right? And as you see here, right, in logic and argumentation, the most important thing here, right, regardless of what your framework is, Appealing strictly to what works can sometimes be a logical fallacy, specifically argumentum ad matam or whatever the fuck. Appeal to utility, right? If it is used to dodge whether a statement is actually factually true. And that's what Jay is getting at here. Is it actually true? Or are you just saying that it's true because it has some utility? This is the kind of stuff that Jordan Peterson was talking about when he said, sometimes things are true enough. They're true. You might not know the full truth of it, but sometimes it's true enough in order for you to operate in the world. Right?
Bad
Explain
argument.
why.
Because appealing to things that work or pragmatism.
So
isn't
what Tim said is a bad argument. It's pragmatic, but it's a bad argument when you're talking to somebody like Jay and you're actually trying to come down to the truth of the matter. What is actually morally true.
Explain why I'm wrong about the requirement of private land ownership for survival.
You grounded the right in utilitarianism and pragmatism, and I'm saying that's not a good justification. It's a bad argument.
So explain.
Yeah, it's not a good justification because a lot of the time, what utilitarianism and consequentialism tends to rely on, right? And we could go back here, right? And we'll ask them like, just ask the Google demons, right? Does utilitarianism often utilitarianism and consequentialism, either way, I'll say both. Does utilitarianism and consequentialism often rely on subjective opinion? Because that's the biggest problem with this, right? When we're talking about facts, it's like you're talking about something that's based on opinion, right? And your moral worldview is based on people's preferences. And that's not a good justification for rights or morals, right? You would rather have something objective. So we're asked them, does utilitarianism and consequentialism often rely on subjective opinion rather than objective? And you can see here, utilitarianism and consequentialism are often perceived as subjective because they are rooted in human experiences like pleasure and pain. Yet they strive for objectivity through empirical measurement and universal application, right? But they do. They rely on human experience. They rely on your subjective experience. So they're not often seen as a good justification for morals, right? And then they, like it says, they try to strive for objectivity through empirical measurement and other things, which is why he was talking about like energy and the effects that it has on the world and shit, right? Those are objective. But whether those effects that it has on the world are good or bad are always based on personal opinion unless you can appeal to something else. That's why people like Jay, who believe in things like divine command, can appeal to something like God, which in their opinion is, or in their framework is eternal and everlasting, never changing. So his standards for morality are also never changing. So it's not based on just subjective human experience. That's essentially the argument he'd be making.
Anything that works could be all over the place. That could be subjective.
Indeed,
Exactly.
that was my point, in which I
And
said
like he just said, it could be subjective. And Tim, that was not your point.
It's
probably
subjective
moral
and it's relative.
structures that work better we have not discovered yet.
Then it's
Before
not
the
a
time
justification.
Yeah, probably. Exactly. And it's not a justification.
So you don't know. So if it's a future thing that you haven't figured out yet, then you don't know right now that it would be a justification.
I understand
Yeah, that's exactly why it's not a good justification.
certain principles of gravity and the speed at which things fall, but we don't know for sure how the structures work.
Then it wouldn't
We
work to
operate based on
justify.
probabilities.
Right. But it would, then that would not work to justify the rights as grounded in an unknown.
Then go jump off a building and see how it works for you.
You told me I have to, so I have to.
Go jump off a building and see how it works because you don't know gravity. It's a future thing.
It's like, see, pragmatism has use, but in terms of like reasoning with morals, it's not necessarily true, right? So it's not a good argument to make. There's nothing wrong with making a pragmatic argument. It's just that in terms of morals, if you're talking to somebody who believes in objective morality, you can't really use pragmatism to come to a justification for objective morality.
Haven't figured out yet.
Because pragmatism is inherently subjective, right? At least for the most part.
on probabilities based on what we think we know because we actually don't know.
But that doesn't ground a right, Tim. That's the point. In
Indeed.
future probabilities, I asked you for the grounding for the right to private property.
So far,
Yeah.
human history has proven private land ownership is beneficial to human existence.
That's a circular argument. It benefit. I'm asking how you know that it benefits. What does it mean to benefit? And you're saying because it was good.
It makes more of it.
That's a circular argument.
Why?
Well, why?
Yeah, so self-propagation doesn't equal benefit.
Maybe making more of it's bad.
It's certainly not.
Okay, but why not? That's the point. That's why it's a circle.
Well, let's go back to the origin of what we think we know. Again, because everything we think
So, like, let's review this one more time too,
in
right?
existence.
That's a circular argument. It benefit. Right, Tim. That's the point. In
Indeed.
future probabilities, I asked you for the grounding for the right to private property.
So far, human history has proven private land ownership is beneficial to human existence.
That's a
So far, human history has proven private land ownership is beneficial to human existence. Okay. How? That's the question, Tim. That's one of the reasons he told you that that was circular, right? Well, listen to the claim he made one more time.
a circular property.
No.
But that doesn't ground a right, Tim. That's the point. In
Indeed.
future probabilities, I asked you for the grounding for the right to private property.
So far, human history has proven private land ownership is beneficial to human existence.
That's a circular argument.
Yes, it is circular. And he said, so far, human history has proven, right? This is also, this might be begging a question as well, because it's like, you said that human history has proven it. You haven't told us how human history has proven it. You just asserted that human history has proven it. So it's like, well, you already assumed that this was proven in the claim. So it's like, we can't argue against the claim because you already assumed that it's proven within the claim itself. This is why you need to understand logic in order to understand why arguments like this are a problem, right? So we can even do this really quick, right? So I haven't used it too much in any of our other analysis. I showed you guys this shit before, but we have the fallacy detector here. And I'm going to put Tim's statement in the fallacy detector, and we're going to see what we get here, right? So what he says here is, so far, human history has proven land ownership is beneficial to human existence. Let's analyze that and see what the fallacy detector finds. So it says here that the main thing it finds is faulty generalization. Now, again, Tim didn't offer any evidence for this, right? But the fallacy of faulty generalization occurs when a conclusion is drawn from a sample that is too small, unrepresentative, or otherwise inadequate to support the broad claim being made, right? So the reason it's saying that Tim is guilty of this fallacy is because he actually started his statement by saying, so far, human history has proven private land ownership is beneficial to human existence. He said, so far. What was that notification from? So when he says so far, he's admitting he actually doesn't have all of the data or whatever, right? So far, human history has shown that it's inadequate to support the claim he's making. Because it's like, he's also not providing any other evidence with this, like I'm saying. But there's another issue here. And that's why I said sometimes, so why I don't use it that often, the fallacy detector is off sometimes, right? So this is why we like to go to the AI, the Google AI, the Google demons, and have it examine the claim a little closer, because the fallacy detector just kind of automated. It's not AI, so it's not really like, it's not examining it fully. It does do a pretty good job of what it can do though, right? But like I told you, there's a couple more fallacies with this claim, right? And I'm going to show you. It's just easier to read it off than to try to get into a deep explanation. And you can see I'm not just pulling it out of my ass when it's on the screen in front of you. So, oh shit, I'm turning this on. Okay. As you can see here, it says this statement contains a few logical fallacies and argumentative shortcuts that simplify a very complex historical reality, right? Hasty generalization. It draws a universal conclusion based on a limited set of historical examples. Like many indigenous cultures or communal civilizations that thrived for millennia without formal private land titles. This is why, right, the fallacy detector said faulty generalization, right? But me understanding claims and the way they work, I was, like I told you, there's a little bit more. There's a little bit more than just hasty or faulty generalization, right? Like it says here, appeal to tradition. This assumes that because a system has existed for a long time or played a role in the past, it is inherently correct or the best way to possibly organize a society, right? That is what Tim is doing. Don't make no mistake. When he made the argument, that is what he was saying, right? He was arguing that pragmatically, we've come to this conclusion. He's saying that he thinks Christian morals are superior or whatever because of all that. Essentially, because it's better for organizing societies. That's essentially what he said. So he is guilty of this fallacy right here, right? And it also says confirmation bias. It focuses on the successes associated with private property, economic growth, or food security while overlooking the costs such as land displacement, environmental degradation, and extreme wealth inequality, right? Now, that one might be a little here nor it might be neither here nor there, right? But it's definitely confirmation bias because, like I told you, in the statement itself, he says that it's been proven. He doesn't tell you how it's been proven. He doesn't provide any other evidence for that, even after the fact, right? He's just kind of asserting it. That's a problem, right? And like I said, you can see down here, begging the question. That's why I said it's begging the question. And that's why Jay said it was circular, because the other way to refer to begging the question fallacy is as circular reasoning. You heard what I'm saying?
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Now, all reasoning is circular. But specifically when somebody says it's an issue is when you're begging the question. And we get to that in a second. First of all, it also says correlation versus causation. It assumes that human progress occurred because of private land ownership, rather than considering other factors like technological innovation, trade, or geography might be primary drivers, right? And that private land ownership might just be a consequence. Yeah, correlation versus causation, right? Like, again, he didn't provide any evidence for this. He just made this claim. And there are a lot of issues with just making this claim and not providing any evidence, especially when you say something like it's proven, right? Because as you can see here with the begging the question fallacy, the statement often relies on a specific modern definition of beneficial, usually measured by GDP or productivity, that private ownership was designed to maximize, right? Making the conclusion true by definition rather than by evidence. That's why I say when you inherently say like, oh, well, it's proven by these things or whatever, it's like you're already baking a bunch of assumptions into the statement itself that just make it true by definition because you said it's already proven. Right? You haven't provided any evidence to actually show us why that's the case, and that is why it's fallacious.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
These are things you have to understand. Don't just go out throwing out claims. Think about them before you make them.
It benefit. I'm asking how you know that it benefits. What does it mean to benefit? And you're saying because it was good.
It makes more of it.
That's a circular argument.
And that's why he said, what does it mean to benefit, right? And he said it makes more of it. Right? Like, is that a definition of benefit? Let's see. What's the definition of benefit, right? Let's ask the Google demons, what's the definition of benefit? Right? Benefits of metacognition. There's a lot of benefits of metacognition. Is an advantage, profit, or helpful effect that promotes well-being. So it makes more of itself.
So far, human history has proven private land ownership is beneficial to human existence.
It makes more of itself.
It benefit. I'm asking how you know that it benefits. What does it mean to benefit? And you're saying because it was good.
It makes more of it.
That's a circular argument.
He said benefit makes more of it.
Why?
Well, why? Maybe making more of it's bad.
It's certainly not.
Yeah, exactly. You're already inherently, that's why it's baked into it. That's why he said it's circular, right? Again, moving back, right? Moving back. Begging the question. It relies on a specific modern definition of beneficial. Yes, Dyer, yes. Dyer did bake him. He did. He was cooking this nigga. Yes, he's like,
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Shout out to one of our first chatters on YouTube. Shout out to y'all. We don't be live on YouTube like that, but shout out to one of our first live chatters on YouTube. But yes, he's cooking him right now. He's begging the question. He's not even using a modern definition of beneficial. This nigga said it makes more of itself. Like, what?
Okay, but why not? That's the point. That's why it's a circle.
Well, let's go back to the origin of what we think we know. Again, because
Yeah, you have to explain to us why that's beneficial. You can't just say, well, it's beneficial because it makes more of itself. Or, okay, you're assuming that making more of itself is beneficial.
everything we think,
You have to tell us why that would be beneficial. If you don't, it's fallacious.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
It's circular.
is rooted in what we think we know, right?
It's beneficial because it's beneficial, and it's beneficial because it makes more of itself, and it makes more of itself because it's beneficial.
Some people think the Earth is flat. They're probably wrong, but honestly, I've not done the experiments myself to a great degree.
See, they're probably wrong. See, like you said, you haven't. Yeah, exactly. See, like, shut the fuck up, Tim.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
You don't know what shape the Earth is, nigga. So I don't pretend to know the shape of the Earth either. I've seen, like, one of the other times I've seen Tim get as embarrassed as he is right now is when he was talking to Austin Whitney.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Yeah, because it's just, I mean, look, man. His command of logic is not very strong. I'm gonna be honest. I'm
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate it.
I've just been in a plane. So if we go back to, again, roots of science, we can take a look at a few things. Free energy tends to coalesce into complex systems, starting with the baser elements, or we can say quarks into particles, into atoms, into elements, into compounds. At some point, for some reason, you get gravity.
Yeah, like, so Tim goes on this long fucking spiel. Like, and I'm just like, nigga, what are you talking about? You're talking about biology and elements and shit. Like, nigga, what? Where's all this coming from? No, not orthodox. That's dude, some would consider me orthodox in certain ways. I fuck with Orthodox Christians though, more than Protestants. I'll be honest about that.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
A great degree. I've just been in a plane. So if we go back to, again, roots of science, we can take a look at a few things. Free energy tends to coalesce into complex systems, starting with the baser elements, or we can say quarks into particles, into atoms, into
This is so irrelevant. This is all, as far as I'm concerned, this is all a non sequitur. This has nothing to do with him and Jay were actually talking about.
Compounds. At some point, for some reason, you get gravity, likely because if you're familiar with our current understanding of gravity, mass creates attraction, etc. And this results in certain masses coming together. Eventually, you'll get something like a gas giant. You'll get something that compresses, then ignites fusion, and you get a sun. We get all this stuff. Then you get an Earth. Earth is the result of certain things slamming together, creating a bunch.
He did. He got cooked by Andrew Wilson and Dyer back to back. Yeah. So one of the things I didn't show y'all is that Tim has had this conversation or similar conversation with Andrew Wilson before. And, he kind of got cooked.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
So, like, this is like the second time Tim has been cooked on this, to be honest. I don't know why he thought he was ready for Jay Dyer because he, like, dealt with Andrew before. Like, he thought he had his argument ready and shit, but Jay was just like, nah, nigga, what do you mean? Like, how are you appealing to the Bible and be fruitful and multiply and you're not even Christian? Like, what? like, this doesn't make any sense.
What the fuck?
Bunch of complex elements through the process of fusion, etc. And then at some point on Earth, for some reason, again, we don't really know for sure, these molecules and compounds start forming self-replicating proteins. Again, in
yeah, Tim was doing the thing where he started talking about science and make it sound like he know what he's talking about. Oh God, that's what he doing.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
That nigga don't none of this shit have nothing to do with justifying rights, nigga. You're trying, because he talking about natural rights. So for some reason he's getting into like, like natural law, like he's getting into like physical laws and shit for some reason. It's like, this natural laws, it's not necessarily the same thing. You can't really like connect those things and really come to a conclusion, but he's trying. That's what he's trying to do right now. He's trying to connect like scientific laws to like natural law and shit. And he's doing a shit job of doing it. I ain't gonna lie. It's just no.
Modern science, the one thing we recognize is that there is greater entropy and limited entropy.
So you said in natural science. See, you said in modern science. So he's trying to connect like science and like natural laws, natural scientific laws to like natural law in the philosophical sense and natural rights. And we just, I'm sorry, bro. Like if anybody was able to do it, it would not be you.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Like I'm sure some people can do it. Like I'm sure some people can attempt to do it or whatever, right? Like Jordan Peterson can attempt to do that kind of thing, right? But he's studied to the point where he can do that. Tim, I'm sorry, this is not your lane.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm
Cut
gonna
it
tell it.
out. Cut it out.
Negative entropy can only exist in a slightly greater entropic system. But we do see free energy organizing into complex systems throughout the Earth and in the universe. That's what we monitor. Eventually, these complex systems ultimately become they become cellular organisms.
It's like, nigga, what does this have to do with
rights? They
rights?
then create complex organism systems. They create ecosystems. Now you've got a squirrel planting a nut, growing a tree. The tree then drops the food for the squirrel.
What
And
the
then you've got two
fuck?
distinct life forms that form a
Nigga talking about squirrels planting nuts and shit. Like,
complex
what?
system within its own free energy. And then we get to the craziest part with humanity in the creation of abstract complex systems. That is, humans give names to things that don't exist anywhere in reality except in the
Okay, what you didn't have to do that whole spiel on science and shit and fucking squirrels and acorns to fucking say that, nigga.
and the energy transference between the mind and the vibrations between their mouths. So what we then see is the function of life is negative entropy within a larger entropic system. If we as life, which are driven to reproduce and are, and we typically
I don't even want to address this stuff he's saying because it's so off topic. This part here, this part here. I ain't gonna lie, this part here is
complex
probably one
organism
of the
systems.
funnier
They
parts.
create ecosystems. Now you've got a squirrel planting a nut, growing a tree. The tree then drops the food for the squirrel. And now you've got two distinct life forms that form a complex system within its own free energy. And then we get to the craziest part with humanity in the creation of abstract complex systems. That is, humans give names to things that don't exist anywhere in reality except in the
We do.
the energy transference between the mind and the vibrations between their mouths. So what we then see is
The mind and the vibration, the transfer of vibration. Wait, what did he say?
exist anywhere in reality except in the energy transference between the mind and the vibrations between their
They don't exist anywhere except like in the energy transfer between the mouths and the vibrations.
That is,
between them?
humans
Like,
give
so he's just saying like they don't exist anywhere but in our minds and in what we say.
names to things that don't exist anywhere in reality except in the energy transference between the mind and the vibrations between their mouths. So what we then see is the function of life is
The energy transference between their mouths and or their minds and the energy transference between the vibrations in their mouths or some shit, whatever the fuck. He's basically just saying like it only exists in our mind and in our speech, but that's technically not true, right?
negative entropy within a larger entropic
Like something like I've had this conversation with people before, like is math abstract? Or does it exist in reality? You can say technically it's abstract, but it's based on reality. The abstract would not exist without the physical. We acknowledge that there are multiples of physical things and that we can add and subtract them, right? Based on the number or the quantity of them that exist, right? That the entire concept of quantity, right? The entire concept of quantity is not strictly abstract, you know what I'm saying? So to say that they don't exist anywhere is like, we're just kind of putting words to them, right? We're putting specific designators on these things that we can see with our eyes, but they're not entirely like abstract.
system. If we as life, which are driven to reproduce and are, and we typically associate all of those things with being good and enjoyable, like having kids, having Christmas morning, then we track based on
Oh yeah, wait, hold on. There was one thing he said here that I feel like I wanted to
the mind
address.
and the vibrations between their mouths. So what we then see is the function of life is negative entropy within a larger entropic system. If we as life
Negative entropy within a larger entropic system. The function of life is negative entropy within a larger entropic system. That's what Tim said. Let's see here. I'm interested. Let's analyze this text, right? It's always funny to me when Tim says like, oh, maybe you don't understand this thing. Because a lot of the time he says it when he's in a conversation where he's kind of showing that he doesn't understand something. Sorry, I just find that really, really entertaining. All right, 1911. Right here, yeah. All right. So what we see, life is negative entropy within a larger entropic system. I just want to let the AI examine this claim. I thought this was an interesting claim for him to make. I want to see. I want the AI to examine this claim. What about this claim? Right, we examined his last claim. We're gonna ask it. We're gonna ask it to examine this one and just see what it says. I'm interested to see what it says. Again, I don't take everything the AI says as true, obviously. Just that, so you guys know I'm not talking out of my ass. It's coming from somewhere. Right? That claim is scientifically grounded, but can be prone to equivocation or metaphysical overreach. It's kind of what I thought. It's scientifically grounded because here's how it breaks down. In case anybody had a hard time following what Tim just said, and this is why I said he was trying to connect like scientific laws to natural law and by consequence natural rights. In thermodynamics, life is characterized by negative entropy. Blah, blah, blah. I don't care what this guy's name is. He argued that organisms stay alive by exporting entropy into their environment, eating, breathing, and metabolizing in order, and metabolizing to maintain internal order. Right? Now, the issue here is that when Tim says like this is what life is, it's like you're kind of removing other things that kind of make up life. So the reason the AI here is saying that this is guilty of the fallacy of composition is like while individual organisms maintain low entropy, they do not violate the second law of thermodynamics. Life actually accelerates the total entropy of the universe by converting high quality energy into waste heat. Calling life negative entropy can be misleading if it implies life is an exception to physics rather than a localized expression of it. I think you guys can understand that. I don't think I need to break it down any further than that, right? Right? Just assuming that life is just completely negative entropy, not understanding like, the broader universe around it. And then here, also category error. If used in a philosophical sense, life is inherently good because it creates order. It commits a naturalistic fallacy. It attempts to derive moral value judgment from a purely physical description of energy transfer. So this is what we were talking about. We're saying like, he's like, you're kind of doing the wrong thing here. If you're actually trying to ground rights, because the best way to say it philosophically is that you can't get an ought from an is. Just because, even if energy transfer does work this way, you can't necessarily say that life is good or bad or meaningful purely because of something that exists physically. Like it's like saying, because this rock exists means that the rock is good. Like, no, that doesn't follow. You have to give us more than just the fact that the rock exists. And you say, Jeremiah, you want me to break it down? Which part do you want me to break down? You talking about the negative entropy part? And then the fallacy of composition? What they're talking about here is like they said, it accelerates the total entropy of the universe. So when it says this, like, let's we can dive into it a little bit. Let's go back to Google and we'll look at what entropy is, right? Because he said life is like negative entropy, right? Entropy is a measure of the Earth's thermal energy per unit that is available for doing useful work. So like in science, like useful work is essentially like, I think it's like producing things or some shit like that. Like scientifically, what's the definition of work? Like scientifically, because it's a different definition. Yeah, the work scientific definition. Work is defined as the measure of energy transfer that occurs when an object is moved over a distance by external force, at least part of which is applied in the direction of displacement. It's also calculated as the product of force. See, this is not what I'm looking for. Hold on. here we go. Energy transfer. It's in relation to energy transfer is what we're talking about here. Work is directly related to energy. Doing work on an object transfers energy to it, often changing its kinetic or potential energy, right? So if you do work on an object, it basically like pushing an object is like doing work on it. You're transferring your energy to the object. You push it. Now something that was probably had a bunch of potential energy that was sitting still now has kinetic energy, right? Simple explanation of work. I'm not trying to get too deep into this, right? But entropy, like it says, is a measure of the system's thermal energy per unit temperature that's available for doing so. So basically the amount of thermal energy it has that is unavailable for doing work. So like it's a like commonly understood as a measure of disorder, randomness, or uncertainty. It dictates that in isolated systems, energy tends to disperse and disorder increases over time, known as the second law of thermodynamics. So like kind of like what's the best way to describe, best example, like gas in an isolated system, or like if you just think of like gas in a room, right, it'll spread to fill up the entire room. That's essentially like what the concept of entropy is. So when he said life is negative entropy, the reason that the AI says there's something wrong with that, it's the issue with the fallacy of composition, is because it said life actually accelerates the total entropy of the universe, right? And it says it converts high quality energy into waste heat. So basically, it's implying that life is negative entropy, which again, let's type this in so we can be clear to what negative entropy is. Right? It's the measure of organization and complexity within a system, acting as the opposite of entropy, right? So if entropy is like randomized, just spreading out randomly, negentropy is order and organization. The thing is, on the broader level, it's saying that life does the opposite, right? On a broader level, life does the opposite. Just on a smaller, localized level, you could consider it negative entropy, right? But on the broader level, the AI is saying it would be considered just entropy, right? And it would be contributing to the total amount of entropy in the universe, which would make Tim wrong because he's isolating one small localized expression, and he's saying that it essentially would apply to the whole rather than just that one small area. It's trying to quickly break it down. That's probably the quickest I could break it down without getting any deeper and like citing other sources. It gets really complex, but I did want to cover it because Tim makes a lot of claims in what he just said, and we do need to properly analyze it to some degree, even if it takes a while to go over. Yeah, it's like if that was a bad explanation, let me know. Like, you know, I try to do better with certain scientific topics. It's just the reason I didn't even really want to address it is because they're not even talking about science. Tim inserted this to try to justify his point, and it still doesn't justify his point. That's why I didn't really want to address it. And that like digging deeper into it is kind of falling into Tim's trap. Like if Jay were to have like addressed any of that stuff, he would have fallen into his trap because it's kind of like a red herring, right? None of this stuff actually has to do with the point that they're talking about.
So what we then see is the function of life is negative entropy within a larger entropic system. If we as life, which are driven to reproduce and we typically associate all of those things with being good and enjoyable, like having kids, having Christmas morning, then we track, based on what we have seen throughout the earth, what is the most beneficial to that. There are a few answers for this. Islam could be one of them. They've certainly been massively successful, have lots of kids. We can take a look at Africa and say certainly that is beneficial. However, I would make the argument that
and you
the
can
European
see,
cultures that develop science...
As the more he makes his argument, doesn't it sound more and more utilitarian? Like, doesn't it? Right? Isn't he focusing on outcomes? Producing the greatest good for the greatest number? Not entirely, but it's definitely consequentialist, right? He's judging it's like moral correctness by its axis. Essentially, he's using like a pragmatist argument that basically ultimately ends up being like utilitarian.
Space travel, cures for diseases, and then effectively colonize the whole planet, as well as the Asian cultures have proven greatly that these moral worldviews lend themselves greater to the ectropic system within the entropy. And then we would say, well, it's maybe a toss-up, but I do think that the American Judeo-Christian or just Christian moral values, which include things like private property, have lended itself to the formation of complex systems, that is, life expansion, and all the things that we cherish in the world. And thus, those are the things we...
Like, all of this is just such a non sequitur. Like, oh.
aim for. Certainly, these things are very subjective, and some people believe other things. Some people might think it's better to watch the whole world burn because humans are a virus that spread like a plague. I don't believe that, but I do recognize I can't convince other people, nor do I know everything. So in the end, I ultimately conclude, if we want people to have families and have kids, private land ownership is probably the best thing we can do.
It's a good story, but it doesn't get to grounding or justification for why the right.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing. Jay had the perfect response. Jay had the perfect response.
Right is actually something that is grounded in God. So storytelling is one thing.
Yeah, right. It's grounded in God because God commands us to be fruitful and multiply. And
But you don't accept that revelation, so it's just a
I do. What do you
appeal
mean?
to. Well, you said you're not a Christian.
Maybe. Just because you're not a Christian, you can't believe some things Christians believe?
You can't justify why anybody should believe you. Like, you're like, okay, I'm grounding my belief on this Christian idea, even though I'm not a Christian and I don't even agree with any of the other stuff in Christianity. So you're essentially cherry picking. Like, this is a fallacy. Because how do you even know that that's true? Like, what makes you think that that's true? If you're not a Christian, what makes you take this Christian idea as true? Why are you accepting this Christian idea? You're just picking out this one idea to take and apply it to your worldview, but you don't believe in the actual like framework that would allow you to justify it. Because you can believe in God all you want to. How do you justify the idea or the belief that God told you to be fruitful and multiply if you're not a Christian? So you think you just think that one part of the Christian story is true, which is not even part of the Christian story. That's technically part of the Jewish story. So that's actually a Jewish idea, ironically enough. Like,
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Well, but I mean, you could do that, but it's not a consistent position, is all I'm saying.
It's a consistent...
Yeah, it's not consistent. You can do that, but it's not
position
consistent.
to believe that humans should be fruitful and multiply. I didn't argue that I believe Jesus died on the cross.
But to pick and choose elements of the worldview as a grounding for rights and private property
Is something that everyone will...
Yeah, that just because it's something that I would say this, it's something that everyone will do. Well, guess what? Just because everyone will commit a fallacy doesn't mean you have to commit the fallacy too.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
I'm just saying, you know, like,
Fallacies, 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 fallacies.
Will do.
But that's another fallacy. The fact that
It's
people
not.
do it.
I don't have to
The fact that
confine
people do
myself to
things.
one of someone...
it's because Jay's right. Like, Jay's what I'm saying. Jay can call out the fallacy like that because he's like, nigga, what?
Just a position, is all I'm saying.
It's a consistent position to believe that humans should be fruitful and multiply. I didn't argue that I believe Jesus died on the cross.
But to pick and choose elements of the worldview as a grounding for rights and
Yeah, okay, so this is what I was trying to remember. Okay, so because we don't have our normal site available to us right now, I don't know why. Normally it just pops up easy. Like, yeah, somebody fucked up the landing page. Some of the rest of the shit, it's just not working. So we're gonna have to use this one for now. I think this one should be on here. The cherry picking fallacy. Hold on. So, I mean, we all know what cherry picking is, right? Hold on. Where is this shit? You're supposed to be able to search these things, and it never fucking works. There we go. We got red herring and stuff like what Tim just did, right? It's like focusing on arguing for an irrelevant topic with the intention of distracting the audience. It usually happens when the orator finds another topic easier to outline. That's what Tim was just doing. As far as I can say, that was the red herring. That's what I'm saying. All right, so there's that. There's one, and there's where's the cherry picking at? That's being quoted out of context. Is that what, no, I don't think that's it. No. I mean, well, technically, that could be it. But I'm more specifically looking for where the fuck is this shit at? Ugh, so annoying. Supposed to be able to search these things. Cherry. Cherry pick. I don't know why I can't find this. Where the fallacy? Ah, shit. I might just have to look it up. There's here. Because I can't remember the other name that it goes by. It goes by another name. Yeah, cherry picking fallacy. Here's right here. I mean, I could probably still find. So selectively presenting data, evidence, or facts that support a specific position while deliberately or unconsciously ignoring contradictory evidence, right? Now this is a little different because this is why I wanted to find a specific thing somewhere else, because there's a specific type of cherry picking. Because he's basically taking one text out of the Bible, but he doesn't accept the rest of the Bible to be true. And he's not telling you why he's taking this one selective text out of the Bible, because he's specifically using verbiage that is used in the Bible. But he's also saying, well, I'm not Christian. Well, you don't accept the worldview, but you're accepting the claim, and you aren't telling us why you're accepting the claim. You're just accepting the claim on its face. That's fallacious. Like,
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Private property
is something that everyone will do.
But that's enough.
And then when you say it's something that everyone will do, again, like it's like appeal to ad populum. Everybody does this, whatever, right? Like, come on, bro.
It's another fallacy. The fact that
It's
people
not.
do it. Yeah.
I don't have to
The fact that
confine
people do
myself to
things,
one of someone else's books.
These are fallacies.
It's
the
not.
fact that people do things doesn't have anything to do with whether that's correct or whether that's right.
I agree.
Exactly.
Then you're admitting it's a fallacy.
No, you're arguing that if I believe one thing from Christianity, I have to believe everything.
You did it.
It was an argument about
Tim, you just admitted that it was a fallacy. You literally said you admitted that.
grounding the idea of private property. So maybe you're not familiar with what grounding is. That just means giving an epistemic justification for why that's the case. Good reasons, not just.
And so what's yours?
Well, I believe
Right, an epistemic justification, right? And this is one of the things I wanted to go over, right? Because this is the important part. This is the most important thing that was going on here, right? An epistemic justification for something is probably the most important thing that you'll need to pull from this. It's probably the most important thing that could be pulled from this debate, right? This is why I said you could actually learn a lot if you're paying attention from back and forth like this. Because an epistemic justification is the property of having rational, evidence-based support for a belief, distinguishing knowledge from mere true opinion. It involves meeting intellectual norms, proper reasoning, evidence, or reliability that make a belief worthy of being considered true. It is essential for avoiding error and forming responsible, right? Key word here, responsible beliefs. If you don't have an epistemic justification, you can't say that your belief is even responsible because you haven't actually thought through it, right? Epistemic, if you don't know what epistemic means, let's look at epistemology, the theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its methods, validity, and scope. It's the investigation of what distinguishes a justified belief from opinion, right? So if you have an opinion on something, it doesn't need to be informed by anything other than your feelings. If you're going to claim that something is a fact or that your belief is justified, right? Like that killing people is wrong, right? If you want to say that killing people is wrong and that's a fact, you have to have an actual justification for it, an argument that is valid, that isn't based on the subjective opinions of other people, right? It has to be based on something objective. Or at least that's the best way to justify something, is that if it's based on something objective, because people's feelings and people's subjective opinions differ from person to person, and they can differ from day to day.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
So if you don't have a good argument or a good understanding for why what you think is true or why you think why what you think is true, why you think that's true, right? Again, getting back to metacognition, what we were talking about earlier, right? If you don't understand how you think and why you think things are true, you're not going to have good epistemology. You're not going to have a good epistemic justification for anything you fucking say.
The Christian worldview, and I would defend that.
And now explain it.
But it's coherent, it's consistent.
Right, how?
Well, if you don't have that worldview, you are immediately caught in a bunch of contradictions.
Like what?
Like picking and choosing.
Like what?
Like picking and choosing, well, I'll believe this thing, and then I won't believe this thing. Well, that wouldn't be consistent.
What things are contradictory? What are you talking about?
Well,
It's contradictory. So he said you're immediately caught in a bunch of contradictions. So you understand why he's saying he's immediately caught in a bunch of contradictions. Jay played this at the beginning of the video, right? He's saying he believes that his worldview is consistent, and he believes if you don't hold his worldview, you'll end up with a bunch of contradictions, similar to what Tim did, right? Because Tim doesn't hold his worldview, but Tim wants to appeal to the text that his worldview appeals to in order to justify itself.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
You can't do that. If you don't even believe in the framework, you're cherry picking. Like he just said, you're just cherry picking the things you want to believe and things you don't want to believe. But it ends ultimately, and that's contradictory. Because now you want to accept something from a framework that you don't accept, and you can't explain why you're accepting it.
About grounding the idea of private property. So maybe you're not familiar with what grounding is. That just means giving an epistemic justification for why that's the case. Good reasons, not just.
And so what's yours?
Well, I believe the Christian worldview, and I would defend that.
And now explain it.
But it's coherent, it's consistent.
Right, how?
Well, if you don't have that worldview,
Now, like Tim is trying to get him to explain the worldview.
you are immediately caught in a bunch of contradictions.
Like what?
Like
Now, what Jay didn't just explain the worldview, but that's because he's trying not to let Tim shift the burden of proof, right? Tim was supposed to tell him why rights are justified. He's supposed to give him a justification for rights, and now Tim is questioning him on his worldview.
picking and choosing.
Like
He tried to shift the burden of proof on him. And that's why Jay's not explaining anywhere there. He's going to keep him right here because he's like, nigga, no, you still haven't met your burden.
what?
Like picking and choosing, well, I'll believe this thing, and then I won't believe this thing. Well, that wouldn't be
What
consistent.
Right.
things are contradictory? What are you talking about?
Well, to say that we do it because it works is a contradiction.
Why?
Because it's a fallacy. Works to do what?
Explain your idea.
I explained the fallacy right there.
That's a fallacy.
Yeah, he did. And it's like what we said earlier, right? To do it because it works is a fallacy, right? It's circular. You're assuming that work, first of all, it's like means something specific. We just have to kind of like accept your definition of like works. First of all, like beneficial, right?
Explain.
They're right now they started talking about capitalism, communism, whatever, and now they're on rights. But more specifically, they're talking about the fact that, you know, Tim can't defend his worldview. He's appealing to a God and specific phrasing from a text that he doesn't even accept fundamentally.
What?
Like picking and choosing, well, I'll believe this thing, and then I won't believe this thing. Well, that wouldn't be consistent.
What things are contradictory? What are you talking about?
Well, to say that we do it because it works is a contradiction.
Why?
Because it's a fallacy. Works to do what?
Yeah. Works to do what? You're assuming that it works already. We do it because it works. Well, you already have the built-in assumption that it works.
Explain
You haven't justified. Yeah, Tim is not a good debater. You haven't justified that.
your idea.
I explained the fallacy right there.
That's a fallacy.
Explaining it.
I don't have to.
Yeah. And see, like in situations like this where people are actually, because Jay is actually being pretty good faith here, but Tim is just being indignant because he thinks Jay's trying to be an asshole, and Jay is really just this is logical scrutiny. Like this is strict logic right now. He's just holding you to strict logic. He's not letting you get away with like informal fallacies that a lot of other people might let you get away with.
We do it because it works is a contradiction.
Why?
Because it's a fallacy. Works to do what?
Explain your idea.
Yeah, you haven't explained.
I explained.
And the funny thing is that you're asking him to explain his idea, and you haven't properly explained your own idea. It's crazy.
The fallacy right there.
That's a fallacy.
Explaining it.
I don't have to.
Like, see, like Tim's just being indignant right now. Well, that's a fallacy.
It is. You've contradicted yourself.
How?
Because that was a contradiction. It's paradoxical.
I
You
didn't know
said
that.
one thing was and one thing wasn't, so you're wrong. I'm not going to elaborate.
I mean, see, Tim is just being an asshole right now. Like, see,
I mean, I have been elaborating. So if you're characterizing my position as not elaborating, I've been very explicit.
So what
And
makes
the
what makes
fallacies
the
are.
Christian moral worldview on private land ownership?
Well, we're made in God's image, so we have the Ten Commandments. It has a position where you can't steal. So that's a basis for private property right there. But I can't just
right? Yeah, right there. Yeah. Shout out to Jay. Now, without getting into his presuppositions, he's right. This is consistent with his worldview, right? He appeals to the Ten Commandments. He appeals to the text of the Bible. He believes this worldview. He'll justify this worldview based on based on their logic and their, you know, Christian epistemology or whatever the fuck. But he's consistent because he's a Christian. He can say that. You're not a Christian, Tim, so you can't make that argument. You don't understand that. Unless you're appealing to some other, you know, worldview that has those same kind of ideas, you don't have anything.
Just pick and choose.
You can't explain it.
It's just utilitarian.
What do you mean by explaining?
Like, is your answer just God said?
No, the answer is that your worldview is inconsistent and contradicts. That's a transcendental argument. That's the argument.
What is?
Yeah. His argument is that his worldview is consistent. Even if his argument is that God said, his worldview is consistent. He's arguing that your worldview is not consistent.
Inconsistent about my worldview.
You gave no justification for why rights are a thing. You just said because
literally
it works.
did.
That's not a justification. It's a fallacy.
That I explain a
works.
function of existence.
That's not a good argument. Explaining functions.
That's not an argument at all.
Explaining functions.
That's not a good
doesn't
argument.
lead to justification.
See, like, it's not a good argument. See, yes, saying that something is not a good argument is not an argument. Fair enough, right? You get that. You get points for that, Tim. But he never said it was an argument either, nigga.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
He just told you that your fucking argument was wrong. He's telling you that there's a problem with your argument. Now, you can either respond to that or just continue being an asshole.
That's a bad argument.
So you're just saying things.
Well, you were just
Yeah, literally, he's just being an asshole. He literally is just saying things, yeah.
saying things to me.
I'm explaining
Right? You see how he lost the argument? He actually lost, he realized that he lost the debate, and now he's just being a dick.
to you how it would work in a college class if you're taking an epistemology class. You would
Sure.
Yes, and this is why he's saying, like, in a college class, if you take an epistemology class, this would be terrible. Tim would be failing.
be getting the same critique.
Is your argument God wills it?
No.
Then
The
what is?
argument is that
No.
the worldview as a whole is coherent and gives a justification and a grounding for the ethics
Okay.
and for these
Yeah.
things.
And what?
Yeah, because, like, they can justify, right? So if they say something like, private property is an inherent right, right? They could justify that, and this is what I was explaining on HJ show on Friday, right? They could justify that based on their worldview. Their worldview is actually internally consistent. It's internally consistent. And that's one of the reasons why I said I believe Kemetic philosophy is actually superior to it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just saying.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Now, I don't need to get into that in order to say it, because at the end of the day, this is the main reason why, right? A lot of people would argue, especially with the idea of the Trinity, that it's only internally consistent. That if you were to take it out of that, that wouldn't really hold up, right? Like, you know, some people would say it's special pleading or whatever shit, right? Like the entire concept of the Trinity, some people say is special pleading. But that's when you get deeper into his worldview. Technically speaking, we're not talking about his worldview. We're talking about Tim's worldview.
I explain the coherence of it.
Well, if the world is made by God, if we have ethics being made in the image of God based on
Right. And now listen to him explain it, because I don't think HJ got this far. I don't like, he was looking at like a clip on like X or Twitter, and I don't think it got this part.
Coherence of it.
well, if the world is made by God, if we have ethics being made in the image of God based on the Ten Commandments,
Right. So if God is our basis for ethics, right?
these kinds of things, then it makes sense why things are wrong and right.
Are there other religions?
Of course,
Do they think you are wrong?
that's a fallacy. It doesn't matter.
So why
So,
would why would
other
you
people-
Yeah, that literally doesn't matter. If he's internally consistent, he's internally consistent.
People that don't believe 2 plus 2 is 4.
Yeah, sure. My point.
Like, because they can believe that he's wrong, but if their worldview is fundamentally inconsistent, it doesn't really matter.
Does that have anything to do with does that have anything to do with
Let's
being
try
poor?
this before we actually go to the next segment. If your argument is I am right and other worldviews are just wrong and don't matter,
That's not what I argue. I argue they're contradictory.
okay, I
Yeah, he didn't. He said that you get into a bunch of contradictions
argue yours is contradictory and
Okay, but
yours
that's not an argument.
internal contradictions.
is.
I gave you
It's the argument you gave to me.
I showed your contradiction because you
What's the
said
contradiction?
that it's true because it works.
I didn't say it was true.
You said that that's why you believe it. That was
I said
I asked for
hey,
And just so we understand what internal contradictions are, right? Obviously, it makes sense for anybody who understands what the words mean. But internal contradictions means like within the ideology itself, it has beliefs and doctrines, you could say, that fundamentally contradict each other within the same framework, right? Christianity, they say, hey, we're at least internally consistent, right? We aren't contradicting anything within our worldview, within our framework. It might contradict some things outside of our framework. It might contradict some other ideas of, science and other things. But within Christianity and the Christian worldview, it's internally consistent, is what they say. And there's a difference between other religions who might have other beliefs that are contradictory within the entire framework of the religion. Like, one of the classic examples they like to use is they call this the Muslim dilemma or something, like the dilemma, Islamic dilemma or some shit like that. They say it's a contradiction for them to at the same time say that I think it's the Torah and the Bible are like true, right? To like accept those books as being like, valid in some way, but also to reject like certain parts of them and shit, because the idea is that, God is perfect and things like that, right? So they believe that there's a contradiction within Islam where they believe like two contradictory beliefs, right? Like there's like some cognitive dissonance going on there. At the one point, and I might be explaining this wrong. You'll have to go to David Wood or one of those other niggas who make the argument to see specifically what it is. But on one hand, they say like, we accept these texts to be true, and these are real prophets and yada yada, so on and so forth. But also, they're wrong about this. Basically, that's one of the internal contradictions, or an example of an internal contradiction, is of what he would be talking about that another religion would have. Do I think God is perfect from my perspective? I mean, yes. Like technically speaking, if you're looking at it from like a philosophical sense, it kind of depends, I guess. But I think my definition of a God would probably be a being that is essentially perfect. So he'd have to be. Honestly, I don't think I could consider you. I don't think the concept of a God makes sense to me if there isn't a level of perfection, right? Like the being, in order to have a certain amount of power, you know what I mean? You kind of have to be perfect. Just in terms of like, right, like in order to have omnipotence, that omnipotence would have to be absolute, right? It would essentially be perfect, at least from my understanding, right? Because when I think perfect, look here, right? I tend to use like dictionary definitions for the most part. And even if you like look into like the etymology of certain words, actually, yeah, let's look at the etymology of perfect, right? Because this is the kind of stuff I would go based off, right? A flawless, ideal, right? Flawless, ideal, complete, full, finished, lacking in no way, right? Because that's like my definition of perfect in my head. It's kind of almost synonymous with God, because I mean, if everything comes from God and God created everything, I mean, before any other things existed, he was already complete, full, finished, right? Already flawless. There was nothing but him. So if I believe that, like, perfection has to come from God. At least that's how I see it. I haven't done like any super deep thought into it, but yeah, that's pretty much how I see it. Like God would have to be perfect in order to be a God. Like, even if you were to think of like something like, omnipotence or omnipresence or whatever, right? Those ideas, like the term omni, we could just stay on the etymology dictionary. The term omni, I'm pretty sure, means all, right? Whole, of every kind, right? So if you're going to be a being that has omni anything, right, it would have to be perfect, right? So like, you could basically just replace omni with perfect, right? Perfect potence. Perfect potence. Perfect what's the other one? What are all those? Are all the terms? It's omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent, omnipotent, right? All those things require like a whole, the whole of ability. You have to be complete power, right? Omnipotence, complete power, total power. So you can't be God if you don't have that. So you have to be perfect. Sorry, I probably just repeated that like multiple times, but like I just wanted you to understand why I said it that way. I feel like it's inherent in the idea of God, and I wanted to give you a little justification as to why. Like I told you, I don't like to just say things. It's just like, and if this entire thing is supposed to be a logical analysis, I can't just say things. I have to give you the basis for which I believe this. Yeah.
Based on what we think we know right now, and there may be better structures we discover in the future, this seems to be the best course of action for promoting human existence.
So it works.
Right. That's what he's saying. Yeah, he's saying it works.
It works argument.
I think that's an oversimplification of we act upon
It's not an oversimplification. It's a simplification, but it's not an oversimplification.
probabilities to do the best we can.
Okay, but again, none of those things work to ground why private property should be something everybody should accept.
I think my argument is it helps people survive better than any system we have.
So it works. That's a pragmatic argument, and that doesn't work to justify or ground the position.
It certainly does.
No, not.
Why should we use a fire hose to put out fires?
Yeah, it doesn't epistemically justify it. It might justify it pragmatically within your particular worldview, but in general, it doesn't actually provide any justification for why anybody else should do it. Like why should anybody else accept the pragmatist worldview? That's the problem. Like you're using the pragmatist worldview to justify it, but you're not justifying the pragmatist worldview, right?
You keep thinking that working means that it's a justification. That's not what grounding is even asking for. It's a different type of question.
I understand, but you are not actually making any point at all other than God wills it.
That was not the argument. The argument was that the whole
No, he's literally just trying to get you to answer the question properly. He's trying to let you know you're not answering the question because you're not providing a philosophical grounding for it.
whole worldview.
Your argument is I have a Christian worldview that is
It's a transcendental argument for the whole worldview.
and I have that same exact thing.
No, you didn't argue that at all.
I do.
You argued utilitarianism and pragmatism.
I argued that the structure of life is organizing free energy into complex systems.
But that doesn't tell me what I ought to do. That just says what is.
It indeed tells you what you ought to do.
Why? How is it
Because
universal?
You are to be fruitful and multiply.
Is that universal?
Indeed.
How?
That life procreates and creates more life.
Well, that's a universal claim, but you said
does.
that it's subjective to you. So
Well,
how can
no,
it be-
I recognize that other people believe other things.
Right. You recognize that other people believe other things, but what is your basis for believing that it is universal?
That's not what universal means. It just means, is it binding everywhere at all
You
times?
said it was subjective to me, and I said
You said that.
I said no. I recognize other people believe other things.
That's not what
Yeah.
Other
means.
people could perceive that as subjective.
Universal means it applies at all times, at all places, to all people.
Uh-huh.
They ought to do this.
They should ought to do this.
Okay, what is the basis for the ought in your position?
The basis for
Right.
why people should have children.
And have private property or whatever.
God wills it.
But you don't believe in God in any specific way, so how does that have any
I
meaning?
literally do believe in God.
But you said it's not the Christian God.
Yeah. See, and this is the problem, right? He doesn't believe in God in any specific way. He doesn't have a concept of God that he can appeal to. Like if we were to ask him, like, who is God? What is God? And why do you believe these things about God? He wouldn't be able to tell us because he's not a Christian and he doesn't seem to have any like actual religion. He seems like he's just appealing to Christian values without accepting Christian values, like in Christian framework. He's just choosing like little parts he wants to, but that doesn't like whatever God he believes in, he can't necessarily say is the Christian God if he's not Christian, right?
But it's just parts of Genesis.
Correct. I don't believe in a
So
Christian God.
Okay, so what's the principle of this God?
The principle of God is largely a Christian God.
So you do, but
He's largely a Christian God. So again, you're appealing to a worldview you don't actually accept in order to justify a claim that you actually believe. That doesn't make sense.
I don't get it. But
Do you have the ability to understand that there are different faith structures?
yeah,
You, by all means, you're alled to say my religion is wrong.
but it has to be
But
coherent.
to
Tim.
argue that I
Does it
don't
have to be
have a
consistent?
religion,
Yeah, you have to have a religion first, Tim. Like this nigga's like I don't believe in God. I accept a lot of parts of this Christian tradition, but or I believe in God. I accept a lot of parts of this Christian tradition, but I'm not a Christian. I was like, so what are you then, Tim? Like you're talking about, oh, well, do you know that other religions exist? It's like, okay, Tim, but you haven't really said you have another religion. Like Tim, you're telling us that you're basically telling us you're a deist and you're accepting some Christian values. You're operating with some supposed deontological framework that relies on these Christian values to justify itself. But how can you justify it that way if you're not a Christian? Like, what is your worldview? What is your actual worldview? What is your quote unquote religion or whatever? Like, you don't seem to have anything to base this all on. You're trying to base it on a belief system that you're not a part of.
Certainly, my religion is consistent.
Okay. What is the basis for when you know when to pick from what text and which ones to reject?
I'd ask the same question of you.
He said my religion is consistent. What religion? What religion are you a part of, Tim? You just said you weren't Christian. What are you? Because deism isn't a religion. Deism isn't a religion. It's a belief in God without a religion, basically. But you basically showed us that you're a deist. You haven't tied yourself to any particular ideology or anything. Right, yeah. Tim, and right now, Tim is getting paid the most by, conservatives. It's, his conservative audience, his half conservative audience, so, his fence sitter audience. So his worldview is a fence sitter. Like, even our religion, he's a fence sitter.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Well, that's a too quick way. That's a fallacy.
To ask you to define, so you can
You
explain.
asked me the question I just asked you is a fallacy in debate. Yeah.
Can you do it or no?
Yeah.
Oh, then
I don't pick and choose, so I don't have that problem.
Yeah. I mean, he's right. He's not picking and choosing from the worldview. And just so we're clear on what the tu quoque fallacy is, because it's up here, because I did want to address this the other day. That was the tu quoque. Tu quoque is a fallacy answering criticism with criticism or turning the argument back around on the other person. It's also applied the logic that because someone has done something, that justifies someone else doing the same thing, right? That's what Tim was talking about earlier. Jay was like, that's not a good argument. Just because other people would do it doesn't mean it's something you should do. Like, what the fuck? Like, it's like all your friends go jump off a bridge.
I accept the totality of the Christian paradigm. So for me, it's not a problem to pick and choose. Orthodox.
So are there things in the Bible that you do not adhere to?
No.
Explain to me, like, there's modernization, correct?
Of what?
Of the Christian, I don't know, I guess moral structures. What you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. Like talk to me about Leviticus.
In Protestant tradition, sure.
What about it? It's a typology.
Do you follow it? Are there things to be followed?
Yeah, there's principles in Leviticus, sure. Jesus references those, yeah.
Is it okay to not follow some of them? Is it okay to follow some of them?
Well, Jesus, being the one that gave Leviticus as the law, would have the ability to decide how it's interpreted, so yes.
Are there things in the Bible that you are supposed to do that you don't?
There are temporary ceremonial commands that are fulfilled. So you're talking about like sacrifice animals, sure.
Sometimes.
Yeah, but it's also like, that's technically not like Christian stuff. That's technically Jewish stuff, right?
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
If the principle is that Jesus gave the law and he says how it's exercised and fulfilled, that's not inconsistent.
What I don't understand is there are Christians that don't eat meat on Fridays.
That's just a fasting position that Catholics do.
Yeah. That's just like a personal fasting position. It's not, you're not necessarily being told to do those things. It's just they're deciding that they want to do it.
Yeah, is that right or wrong?
But what does that have to do with Leviticus?
It's neutral.
Now moving forward and asking you about a specific thing I don't understand. That there are Catholics, they don't eat meat on Fridays. Is that not so again? I think you don't view Catholics as coherent,
right?
Just because you have dogs, it doesn't mean I have to. Yeah, it's like it doesn't say you can't. It's not a problem or anything, right? It's not something that addresses directly.
That is well, and the argument there. You view your religious structure as the coherent structure, and other structures are incoherent. Okay, I disagree, and we're allowed to disagree that we have two different moral religious worldviews, and that is the inherent disagreement. So in my moral worldview, I believe there is a basis in private ownership because if you are to fulfill God's will of having children, having families, you need a way to control your resources so that you can do that without it being taken from you.
Right. And the thing is, I don't necessarily have any problem with what Tim is saying here.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
The problem is when he says, we just have a different religion and a different moral structure or whatever the fuck. It's like, nigga, you don't have one. Like... You don't have a religion. You don't. You're not a member of any like, major religion or anything. You said you believe in God, but you're appealing to Christian text. You said the God you believe in is largely Christian. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? You don't have a religion. It's okay not to have a religion, but when you're appealing to this stuff, you can't just be like, oh, well, our only disagreement is that, our religious beliefs and shit. And it's like, no, the difference is that you don't have a religious belief, Tim. So you don't have any actual grounding, because when you start appealing to shit like the Bible, you can't justify that because you're not even a Christian. There's a bunch of stuff that you accept is true and a bunch of stuff you don't accept is true. And to be honest, the majority of Christians, especially Orthodox Christians, like if you don't accept certain things, right, and certain truths, you might either be a different denomination of Christianity or you're just not a Christian. Like they just wouldn't consider you a Christian. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just how it works.
I actually think we agree on that.
And I think he understands that. That's why he's saying he's not a Christian. But that's also why you can't really appeal to their shit, because you have no basis on appealing to it. Like, just like, oh, because just because it's in the Bible and somebody said it. So you're taking the Christian text as the actual word of God, but you don't believe any of the other stuff was the word of God. Like, that's inconsistent. That's why he said that it's inconsistent. And because he actually believes in it, he can appeal to it, and he's internally consistent. That's what I'm saying. Like, Tim just refused to understand this.
That point.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know why you were arguing when we had completely agreed on that, other than to say I'm not a Christian.
Because it's not just a question of having the right position, but what are the good reasons for
That's arguing for the sake of
boundaries?
arguing.
No, it's not. That's what epistemology is.
Let's go talk about Trump's State of the Union. And
Yeah, that's what epistemology is. Yeah, like like you see Tim just trying to move on because like he's getting dog walked on his own show.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Like he got fucking dog walked on his own show. So I would have pivoted off of that too.
yeah. So I don't know why you were arguing when we had completely agreed on that, other than to say I'm not a Christian.
Because it's not just a question of having the right position, but what are the good reasons for
That's arguing for the sake of
boundaries?
arguing.
No, it's not. That's what
He says other than to say I'm not a Christian. It's like, yeah, you have to have good reasons for it. And if you're not a Christian or you're using the Christian worldview to justify your beliefs, you sound like a clown.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Like you sound like you are just regurgitating talking points. You know what I'm saying? And to be honest, that's what a lot of people accuse you of doing, Tim. So, at least for now, you're not beating those allegations.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
I'm just saying, you're not beating those allegations. Not here, right? Because epistemology is important. You got to be able to defend your arguments. You got to be able to defend your worldview. And appealing to Christian ideas when you are not a Christian requires a little bit more work than what you just did. Because it's not that you can't. It's not that you can't. You just have to. You basically have to justify why. You have to give us an explanation as to why you're even accepting this one thing in Christianity. Like if you get connected to something like historically or something, I'd be like, you know, throughout all these different religions or whatever, it seems to be a common thing that God told us to do this or whatever. And I accept this is true, even if I don't accept Christianity. And I believe that this is one of the, you know, this is one of the things that informs our idea of rights and yada, yada, blah, and so on and so forth. But you have to provide some kind of extra justification if you're going to rely on another moral framework and another religious system in order to justify your beliefs. Because unless it exists within your framework in some kind of different way, like say you have a different religion like Buddhism or some shit or whatever, and there are just fundamental things that you guys accept, and it just happens to be in line with Christianity, you have to give us something outside of this other worldview that you don't follow for us to sink our teeth into, right? We need a little bit more than well, this text says this, right? Especially if it's not a text you believe, right? Because in Christianity, when they appeal to the text, they're appealing to God as well. And when they appeal to their God, they have a bunch of other reasons as to why they appeal to their God, right? The transcendental argument, as Jay mentioned here, I might even pull up. Transcendental argument. The transcendental argument for God. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. He said Tim is the fool from Proverbs. Hold on, let's look at this real quick. He said Tim is the fool. Let's see. Let's see this real quick. This is Proverbs 26:4. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. That's fire. That is exactly who Tim is right here. Yeah. That's exactly who Tim is. But yeah, we look up the transcendental argument here, right? Make sure it's more visible here. All right. Actually, here, I want to edit this a little bit. Yeah, a little bit smaller there. Okay, I think that's good. So, the transcendental argument for God posits that God's existence is the necessary precondition for logic, morality, and science. So, part of the reason Jay believes that his worldview is the only consistent worldview is because of this. He believes that you have to have God in order to have a precondition for logic, morality, and science. He believes that all these things would come from God. It argues that because immaterial, universal, and invariant laws exist, an ultimate rational and transcendent mind must exist to account for them. Without this, rational thought is impossible. So it's basically like, kind of like the idea that like none of this stuff can exist independent of a mind. And if there was a point we can point to before any of our minds exist, right? Basically before humanity existed, where all these things did exist, and or let's say we didn't exist and all these things still existed, right? Logic, morality, science. Like technically you could say something like science didn't exist. Technically you could say something like morality didn't exist. But logic, not really so much, right? Like that is essentially like when we breaking down numbers and mathematics and things like that, that's all reliant on logic, right? You don't have a 1 or you don't have a 2 unless you have a 1, right? And 1 cannot equal 2, right? That's like the law of non-contradiction, law of identity. Just those basic things, those basic fundamental parts of reality. They argue that would not exist without God because there has to be some kind of mind to account for it, right? That's the argument. And that's why they believe if you don't have a unchanging, right, standard or being that this is all derived from, it's ultimately based on the subjective and impermanent wills of man, right? All of this stuff is just based on like how we feel in the moment or how we feel about it. You see right here, right? The key aspects of the argument. Break it down a little bit more. The transcendental argument claims that aesthetic worldviews cannot account for the laws of logic, which are immaterial and universal. Like I said, they're immaterial. Like you can't technically physically find them, right? But even if we don't exist, they would still technically exist. Like all these inanimate objects and everything, even if they exist without us, they still have like rules that they kind of adhere to. And none of those rules or any of the logic that the world essentially operates on could exist without some kind of like creator essentially that exists outside of it.
Let's go talk.
All right. And he's also viewed as the precondition that makes knowledge and experience possible. So obviously, if God didn't exist, none of this would exist. We wouldn't have any knowledge and we wouldn't have the ability to experience anything. So like the argument structure is here, right? The premises that they make, right? Absolute truths exist, right? These necessitate an absolute standard, right? An unchanging standard, like I said earlier, right? Therefore, that standard is God, right? An unchanging, eternal force or being or creator that which all of these standards are based upon. We could get deeper into it, but now is not the time. In fact, let's see here. I'm pretty sure transcendentalism. Yeah. maybe we'll cover this when we cover transcendentalism or something. But for now, that's pretty much it. Jay and Tim had a pretty good conversation. You know, a shout out to them. Gave us an opportunity to go over some extra logic, some fallacies, some philosophy. And I could just put a couple things across your desk that you can check out later, right? Check out the transcendental argument. It's actually pretty interesting. I like the Kalam cosmological argument. I think a Muslim made this one originally. It was popularized by William Lane Craig, but I think that this is originally, that's the reason it's called the Kalam cosmological argument. I think it was originally put together by a Muslim. It posits that because everything that begins to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause, identified as a personal creator, right? And then the transcendental argument, you could technically say that it kind of follows from this as well, right? If there is a personal creator or whatever, you know, if there is morality, logic, all these other things that exist, all of these things operate according to that creator, or something like that, right? But yeah, important things to look into if you're, you know, not even just discussing the concept, the existence of God, the potential existence of God, but just kind of like trying to understand it for yourself, right? And not fall for fallacies. Just come to a well thought out position on, you know, whether you believe or don't believe and why you believe or don't believe, right? Like we talked about metacognition. These kind of arguments are important, right? You want to analyze these arguments and see, like, does this make sense to me, right? Do I accept this claim? And why do I accept this claim? It's all important, right? That's all I wanted to go over today. Again, not sure how many more of these we're going to do. I'm going to finish up the prisoners versus guards one, and then we'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling. But I want to focus on some other stuff. And maybe do some more fun stuff on stream. Very clearly, niggas be getting bored.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Hey, you know, let me know if y'all learning. If y'all learning from this, y'all enjoy this, let me know. I'll keep doing them. You know what I'm saying? I got no problem doing that. But send me in some suggestions too. Like I want to see, like, you know, if y'all ever come across anything that's worth, like, you know, breaking down. I'll check it out. Like I wouldn't have seen this if Hotep hadn't have Oh, you like these arguments? Okay. That's good to know. It's good to know. Yeah, if Hotep hadn't covered this on Friday, I wouldn't never even known this happened. And because I haven't covered a Jay Dyer debate yet, but like I told y'all, you can go to his, actually, this is his channel. He does his stuff all the time, which is one of the reasons I can see. I mean, you probably should clip your appearance on Timcast anyway, but I'm sure he did that because this is just normal stuff that's on his channel, right? But if you look at like his channel and his different live streams and shit, like Jay does this shit all the time. He debate, like you see right here, God, atheism, Islam, Hebrew roots. Like he gets into the text and shit. Like if you look at Jay's channel when he's debating people and shit, this nigga has a whole, like, look behind him. You see all them books and shit? Like he's an Orthodox Christian and he really be studying. Like he really be studying. He's probably the best. A lot of people say he's the best Christian debater online. So what you saw with Tim was just like a microcosm, right? That was just like that was a tiny sliver of what Jay is capable of in a debate. And, you know, even people that I've shown some of Shaka's work before want to see him go back and forth with people like Jay to see, like, you know, how Kemetic philosophy stands up against some of these like Orthodox Christian philosophers and shit, right? And it's very interesting. It's very interesting. I don't really check out his channel too much, but as you can see, I'm not even subscribed. Actually, I'll shoot him a subscription right now. I should be subscribed because I check out his stuff every now and then. But normally I see it through like Andrew Wilson, who's like one of his friends. He makes similar arguments, but he's not as good on like the church doctrine and the church history as Jay Dyer is, right? Like if you start talking to him about like, you know, the councils and all this stuff, like Jay is very learned on that stuff. Yeah. Sometimes you just ain't got time to read all of it. But I mean, hey, you can why don't you ask the AI to summarize it for you? You know, you can get the cliff notes on the important parts that you don't get the chance to get to, you know what I'm saying? I mean, hey, you know, might as well use it. We have it. Nothing beats like reading a book directly, but sometimes you find that like you read through all of it just to get something that you could have got from like a short summary, you know what I mean? Not to say that you shouldn't read it, but some things I feel like are like that, where you'll read through like an entire book and it's like, well, the majority of this could have just been condensed. Yeah. Anything to do with economics is a pretty tough read. Like I'm still reading basic economics. You know, there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I mean, like, hey, if you're a fan of, you know, Christianity, Christian philosophy, yada yada, whatever. Like, why does it say comedian? Is Jay Dyer a comedian? I didn't know that. Oh, it says writer for the Sam Hyde Show. Oh, I didn't know that. Very interesting. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about that stuff, like check out Jay Dyer. He goes over this stuff all the time. You know, that interests you. I more like seeing people go back and forth about this stuff. And I like people who are educated on topics. I like seeing people go back and forth when they're educated on the topic. I don't like seeing two dumbasses go back and forth unless it's just for like pure entertainment. But if I'm trying to like learn something, I'm trying to get more perspective on something, I like people that are like, you know, versed on the topics. Jay is one of those people. But yeah. So next time, yeah. I mean, Tim is educated. He's not very well educated in philosophy, I'd say. And just like his use of epistemology and logic, his command of logic needs some work. Needs a lot of work. And you know, mine does too. You know, I'm not acting like I'm perfect, but this is why the main thing I try to do is just stay away from making claims that I can't substantiate. I stay away from making claims that I'm not really ready to properly argue. Right? That's why you see, like, if somebody asks me something, even if I do feel confident on it, like, you know, somebody were to ask me, oh, what is the Kemetic philosophy or whatever? It's like, because I know I might conceptualize a little differently than other people, I'm not going to just jump out the window, especially if I'm still doing some studying, and then make certain claims about it. Only to just, you know, get a bunch of pushback on my particular view, right? I would rather just say, nah, I'm not quite done with my research yet, so I'm not ready to speak on it. Doesn't mean I can't have opinions about it or whatever, right? But I'm not going to make those claims of my opinions as if they're facts. And you know, as long as it is just my opinion, I don't have to justify it.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Like, nigga, my opinion could just be my feels, nigga. That's
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
So sometimes it's what you got to do. You got to understand when something is just your feelings. This is why metacognition is important. You got to understand when something is just your feelings or something you feel is true, but you're not entirely sure. Like you haven't fully researched it enough to really come to a conclusion on it. Because people say that about voting and things like that or whatever, but they never think about it when it comes to, like, you know, their beliefs on a day-to-day basis. And that's even more important, I'd say. right? You don't want to be carrying around ideas in your head that are fundamentally contradictory. If that's cognitive dissonance, right? I don't know if you guys are familiar with cognitive dissonance, but it's the mental discomfort experience when holding conflicting beliefs, values, or behaviors. And then there's another thing we try to avoid here too, which is called the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Now, I tend to fall into this, but mostly because I underestimate my intelligence, and I would prefer to underestimate my intelligence than to overestimate my intelligence.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Right? Even if I feel like I'm well versed in something or whatever, you know, like the Buddhists were talking about, oh, you seem to understand this a lot. It's like, I'm like, no, don't put that on me, nigga. I don't understand shit.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
I don't understand the goddamn thing. You know, they say the smartest man in the world, no, he don't know shit. That's how I operate. But I would rather underestimate my intelligence than overestimate it. And a lot of people, right, they do this, where people with limited knowledge or competence in the domain greatly overestimate their own expertise, right? So you could be an expert in something like, you know, biology or whatever, like, you know, like Tanai, you could be a PhD, but then you start speaking in a field that you don't work in on, you know, topics that you're not, you know, well versed in. Like Tanai is a pretty smart guy, but I'm sure he would probably say he's not a rocket scientist or whatever, right? Probably understand some aspects of rocket science, but he's not a rocket scientist. So Tanai would not likely start speaking about that shit as if he understands it to some large degree, unless it's a very specific area or whatever, right? Like, you know, like the chemicals and things that they mix for rocket fuel or whatever the fuck, right? He's smart enough to know where his expertise ends, right? And where another field of expertise begins. A lot of people are not smart enough to do that. A lot of people would try to act as if they know a lot about politics, for example, just because they know something about economics. Well, that's not necessarily the case. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're stepping outside of your field of expertise.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Right? So I would rather not do that, right? And you can see how it says here, right? Unskilled individuals lack the metacognitive ability to recognize their own incompetence. I prefer not to do that. I try to recognize my own incompetence. I try to understand what I don't know so that I can understand what I need to learn to have a proper view on certain things. Simple as that. All right. And probably yapped your ears off enough for today. Actually, I'm pretty sure I'm off tomorrow. So we'll probably finish up the prisoners versus the guards analysis tomorrow. Who knows? I probably be doing it earlier than usual since I'm off. And I have like physical therapy, so you know, physical therapy and physical therapy and Japanese class on Monday. So I mean, we'll try to fit it in if we can. But yeah, if we do, I'm probably gonna fit it in earlier in the day. We're gonna try to wrap that up, and then very likely later tonight we're gonna be doing our reaction to Could Have Been Love episode 3. Motherfuckers have decided to like schedule a bunch of other shit this weekend, like. Yeah, physical therapy. I've been injured for like 10 years, and I did just never finished my physical therapy. So I'm trying to finish it now, so I can get back in the gym and get to working out regularly. Because they told me I was making it worse working out. Like, well, so I had to stop, and I want to get started again quickly. So we need to finish this shit. Need to make sure I heal. Would you want to see a debate with Jehovah's Witnesses versus Hebrew Israel? That sounds fucking amazing. Yeah, send me that shit. Yeah, send me that shit. That sounds amazing. That sounds very entertaining. I mean, I don't know how much of a logical analysis I do there. I probably would, but that just sounds very entertaining. Yeah, send me that shit. That's what I'm saying. Like, y'all got to send me some suggestions. Like, y'all send me some good debates, man. We'd do a lot more of these. This shit is fun, and I'm strengthening my command of logic as well while we do this. So, and I'm learning a lot of other stuff. Like, some of this stuff I'm not too versed on. So like when we look it up, you could probably tell like when either like the explanation I'm reading is not the same thing I'm used to, or when I'm receiving some new information. But yeah, like just so you guys know, like obviously I'm not a fucking genius, so I don't know every single thing about all of this stuff. I tend to have like at least like a basic understanding of it, and if my explanation is ever off, let me know, because I mean we can find a video of somebody who has a better understanding of it that can explain it, and we can just like cover that. So again, if you have anything like that too, if any of my explanations are lacking and you feel like you saw like a video of a guy who explained it better, we can examine that too, because that'll help me better understand it too. I don't pretend to have more knowledge than I do. But yeah, so prisoners versus guards, next one we're gonna finish up. The ism, the episodes of the ism, they're gonna be a lot more random, I think. I'm trying to stick to the date. Makes it difficult for me to do the research the way I want to do it. We may or may not keep doing the slides, because the slides take a while too. And again, like I would like to do more research, and putting together the slides takes away time from the research. Although like the last time I did the slides, I did all the research. I was just researching all month, and I put the slides together at the last second. I literally just took pictures of my notes and made the slides based on my notes. Well, so while it doesn't take that long, it still takes away from some of the time I'd like to do researching. So I'm not entirely sure, but we're gonna try to still have them monthly. We just might I'm thinking what we'll do is do like some smaller episodes that don't have presentations, where we just cover like an idea or whatever. Because the other thing is, not every ism requires that much research, right? Some of them are very simple. They don't get too deep, or at least not simple, but they don't get too deep, not deep enough to require an entire like long episode and presentation. So we might start doing like smaller ism episodes where we cover like the smaller ideas, and then like maybe every 2 months or so we do like a big one, because I've gotten a little bit more time to research it and fully put together the presentation. I think that's what we're gonna do. You know what I'm saying? I think that might be what we do going forward. But yeah, let me know how you feel about that. And it is what it is. I'm gonna do what I want anyways.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
But yeah, let me know how you feel about that, because if y'all like that idea, I probably will just start doing more smaller episodes, covering some smaller stuff. And we will occasionally cover them during analysis and shit, because they might be relevant to a debate topic. Nice. Yeah, do that. Perfect. But other than that, yeah, next one today, I think likely today, I'm gonna be doing the Could Have Been Love reaction. This is mainly on the Nimbo channel, so make sure you go follow the Nimbo channel, kick.com/Nimbo Stratosphere. All right, did I go in there right? Yeah. So go follow the other channel. We're likely going to be doing a reaction to Could Have Been Love season 2, episode 3 today. Niggas decided to schedule a bunch of other shit during the weekend. We were supposed to do this shit yesterday, but niggas decided to go have a life and shit. So we're gonna do it today instead. Better fucking do it today, because if we don't do it today, we're not doing the shit. Or we gonna have to do like 2 next week. So I want to do 1 for every episode, but I'm not trying to do them alone. I'm gonna do like for the other channel and shit. So let me see how that works out. Stay tuned. Because I might do that in like an hour or 2 tonight, because I'm not trying to do it too late. Yeah, keep an eye out for that. Until then, I will bid you beautiful people. Au revoir. I ain't gonna do you like Hotep do you, I ain't gonna do you like that, Oh yeah, guess what? Yeah, no, I'm gonna do that. All right, peace out. That shit was funny though. He's cracking me the fuck up with that shit. I was dying. Niggas was mad as hell. All right. Peace out, y'all.